dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight.
What's up, y'all? How are y'all tonight? Sunday, Kitty Coo, Pika. Hey, Sarah. So, I have the whole DOJ report for the investigation in the MPD, and here comes this. What, man? You want your shine? Boy. Why are you trying to eat my lip? I already know what it is. It's my chapstick, my Carmex. Why are you trying to lick it off my face? No. I love you. What? Get out of my face. You wouldn't be sneezing. Zeus. We do this every live. You know this. They be expecting this now. You know this. You got fans. Zeus. You son. I know. But can I hey. Now this big motherfucker need to get off of me. Come on. No. Down. Get down. You distracted me, and I got to get this done. This is 73 pages. We're not doing it. Down. Go. We're not doing it. He is staring at me like, bitch. Go. Go, son. No. Go. Get down. I don't want to hear the protest. Just get down. Thank you. No. Go lay down. You done? You had your camera time. Go lay down. Are you serious right now? So, thank you. This man had one eye behind the laptop and the other eye looking at me like, really? You gonna make me? Yes, go lay down. What's up, y'all? God. I swear it never fails. As soon as I start talking to y'all, goddamn dog hair all over my phone. Thank you. Appreciate that, son. Thank you. Look, yeah, they just think it's so funny. They're eating it up. They expect that shit every time now. All right. So we're going to be discussing the 73-page report that the DOJ has released into the investigations of MPD in the city of Memphis. And like I said last night, it's bad. Now, I can say, and I will say, Memphis, the city of Memphis, and MPD, because the DOJ made this explicitly clear to us. It was about 400 of us in that Zoom call. They did make it clear that the city of Memphis and MPD did cooperate fully with the investigation. So they did hand over files. They handed over, if the DOJ asked for it, they did give it to them. So I do have to give the city of Memphis and MPD credit for that, because I was surprised about that. But they did. They gave it to them willingly. But they were still found in some serious violations. So we're going to discuss some of those violations and the DOJ findings and some of the proposals they may have. Now, I will say there's going to be a part of this that I don't discuss. It most likely will be discussed in Dutch's Live tomorrow. But hearing this report, and if you join Dutch's Live tomorrow, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And what I've been trying to say and tell people is exactly what's happening in this city. But with the missing people we have here, just keep that in mind. So, and forgive me, y'all, for anybody that's coming in. This is 73 pages, so I'm trying to get through this. So I'm not ignoring you. I promise I'm not. I'm just trying to get through this so everybody have an understanding. I'm telling y'all now, y'all see Pika is already dropping the trigger warning. I sent this to Pika last night. I sent it to a few others. One person did join me. One creator did join me on the call. She has the report as well. So it's bad. I couldn't do it last night. I couldn't. Some of the one cop we talked about on my page made he's in here too. Just FYI. So I redug his information back up because see the DOJ didn't name him, but surprise, surprise, I had already did a story on him. So yeah, there's that. He made a surprise entry in this report. Yeah. So let's get to it. So the reason everybody knows the reason the events leading up to why the DOJ ended up coming here to Memphis to investigate MPD and the city of Memphis it is strictly because of the Tyree Nichols case. That is why. It is because of his case. That is why the DOJ came down here and had a 17-month investigation against MPD and the city of Memphis. So just a heads up there, which ties into another video I'm probably going to do, but we'll talk about that later. So on July 27, 2023, the Department of Justice opened a pattern or practice investigation into the Memphis Police Department and the city of Memphis. After an extensive investigation, the Department of Justice has reasonable cause to believe that MPD and the city engaged in a pattern or practice of conduct that deprives people of their rights under the Constitution and federal law. Findings. MPD uses excessive force. MPD conducts unlawful stops, search, and arrests. MPD unlawfully discriminates against Black people in its enforcement activities. The city and MPD unlawfully discriminate in the response to people with behavioral health disabilities. And this is why I'm telling y'all, some of these stories is bad. They don't go into graphic detail, thank God. But some of these stories they're not good. Especially towards the people that have, mental health crisis going on and things like that. Their response and behavior towards them. And we started this. It doesn't make sense to me, but apparently I didn't know we was that bad. Let me put it like that. Like I knew they was bad, but I didn't know they was actually out here beating mentally disabled people. Yeah. Memphis has relied on traffic stops to address violent crime. The police department has encouraged officers in specialized units, task force, and patrol to prioritize street enforcement. Officers and community members have described this approach as saturation, which it is true, because every day they be in a different neighborhood and you'll see them 15 deep on the E-way, or you'll see them 15 deep in the neighborhood. And they rotate the neighborhoods that are pretty much have the most police calls. I'm not gonna lie about it. That's how they do it. So one day they may be in Fraser, or they'll be in North Memphis or South Memphis. They've been over here in Raleigh. Like it really depends on the crime in your zip code, but they do. They be like, it is, especially like towards Austin P, where they built the main precinct there. They do though. They will, and that's how they end up. Yeah. The strategy involves frequent contact with public and gives wide discretion to officers, which requires close supervision and clear rules to direct officers' activity. But MPD does not ensure that officers conduct themselves in a lawful manner. MPD's traffic stops sometimes have tragic consequences. On January 7, 2023, officers in one of MPD's specialized unit kicked, punched, tased, and pepper sprayed Tyree Nichols, a 29-year-old black man, during a traffic stop. When officers caught up to Mr. Nichols, they beat him as he cried out for help for his mother, who lived just a block away. Mr. Nichols, died 3 days later. MPD officers regularly violate the rights of people they are sworn to serve. Our investigation found that officers use force to punish and retaliate against people who do not immediately do as they say. They rapidly escalate encounters, including traffic stops, and use excessive force even when they are already handcuffed and restrained. Yes, you heard that. They resort to intimidation and threats. They have put themselves and others in harm's way. Officers have unlawfully fired at moving vehicles and accidentally pepper sprayed and fired tasers at each other. Justin, they're talking about you, baby. You're the only one that was tasing your own officers. Just saying. The lack of supervision also has contributed to officers stopping and detaining large number of drivers for minor infractions without legal justification. In a city of about 630,000 people, MPD officers reported making 866,164 traffic stops between January 2018 and August of 2023. The number of stops may even be greater. They cited or arrested drivers in at least 296,685 cases, predominantly for minor infractions. These practices are intrusive and routinely violate the law. Prosecutors and judges told us that officers do not understand the constitutional limits on their authority. Officers stop and detain people without adequate justification, and they conduct and invasive searches of people and cars. These practices undermine public safety. They erode trust in law enforcement and result in cases getting dismissed by courts or dropped by prosecutors. And a lot of these cases that they investigated and where MPD had charged them, a lot of them were dropped. But I want to make sure I touch this last part, and then we'll get into like the findings and everything, because this part right here, I want to make sure people understand. I want people to understand when I say this, and then you'll hear the numbers that come behind this. Memphis is a majority Black city, but Black people in Memphis disproportionately experience these violations. MPD has never assessed its practices for evidence of discrimination. We found that officers treat Black people more harshly than white people who engage in similar conduct. Racial disparities in Memphis are driven by police departments' unsupervised enforcement of low-level discretionary offenses without proper review or controls. Other strategies like improved violent crime investigations and community-based violence prevention programs would more directly serve MPD's and the city's public safety mission without resulting in unnecessary disparities. Each year, police officers in Memphis respond to thousands of calls involving behavioral health issues. Dispatchers code most of these calls as nonviolent, but the city sends police officers anyway. While other cities have developed programs to send an appropriate response to behavioral health calls, Memphis has left the responsibility to police. Memphis is widely known as the originator of the crisis intervention team model, in which specially trained police officers to respond to behavioral health calls. Yet, while MPD officers handle some behavioral health calls properly, we identified many incidents in which officers, including officers in the crisis intervention team, mistreated and used excessive force against people with behavioral health disabilities, including children. And just as MPD has not assessed its traffic enforcement practices of racial disparities or effectiveness, it has failed to regularly evaluate the crisis intervention team program, despite evidence that the city's police-only approach is leading to harmful and unnecessary interactions. These violations have a corrosive effect on the Memphis community, including children who have experienced aggressive and frightening encounters with officers. The pattern of practice of unlawful conduct in Memphis stems from systematic deficiencies in policies, training, supervision, and accountability. So the government in Memphis and the MPD, I'm gonna give y'all a background. Yes. Oh, we're gonna get there. I'm trying to roll through this. So I see y'all in the comments. I'm not ignoring y'all. Write your shit down, take notes, because I'm telling y'all gonna be scratching y'all head at some of this shit, and y'all are gonna be wondering how come this shit hasn't. There's really no oversight. There's no supervision whatsoever. Even the supervisors don't know what the fuck they're doing. But I digress. Anyway, Memphis is governed by a mayor and 13-member city council. Mayor Paul Young was sworn in January 1st, 2024, succeeding Jim Strickland, who served as mayor for 8 years. Memphis is the largest city in Shelby County, and the county operates the court system, the district attorney's office, and public schools. Memphis Police Department is the largest law enforcement agency in Tennessee, with about 1,900 sworn officers. 58% of MPD officers are Black, 37. Make sure y'all pay attention to these numbers. Please, like this one, I'm finna tell y'all. Make sure you pay. Everything I've said, I've been saying. I just ain't been saying it this way. I've been telling y'all. Damn it, where the hell was I at? There we go. Law enforcement agency in Tennessee with about 1,900 sworn officers, 58% of MPD officers are Black, while 37% are white, and 3% are Hispanic or Latino. MPD also employs several hundred non-sworn employees, including 911 call takers and dispatchers. MPD's Emergency Communication Center receives about 3,000 calls each day. Operators can dispatch police or transfer calls to the fire department for ambulance or fire response. MPD divides the city geographically into 9 patrol precincts. Patrol officers respond to 911 calls and engage in proactive street enforcement like traffic and pedestrian stops. MPD also has dozens of specialized units. Some units have detectives who investigate homicides and other violent crimes. MPD K9 unit, put a note in the K9 unit too. Make sure you put a pin in that. MPD's K9 unit looks for suspects in missing persons. The Inspectional Services Bureau investigates allegations of officer misconduct. MPD has long deployed specialized units that engage in street enforcement activities, including now disbanded Scorpion Unit. MPD formed Scorpion Unit Street Crimes Operations to restore peace in our neighborhoods in November 2021 to address violent crime, including by making traffic stops in high crime neighborhoods. Memphis officials told us that Scorpion was an expansion of the MPD's pre-existing criminal apprehension team. These units operated citywide, independently from patrol precincts, and the officers conducted traffic and pedestrian stops. The mayor appoints the chief of police, and the city council must approve the appointment. The current police chief is Carolyn C.J. Davis, who y'all know I stay talking shit about her because she's really not. She's the interim police chief, but we're going to leave it at that. And if she ain't, then why y'all keep listening to her as intern? I'm just wondering. Chief Davis has served in the interim capacity. There we go. There we go. I was waiting. Where is that interim at? Okay. Capacity since January 2024, when the city council tabled a vote of her reappointment. From 2016 to 2021, Michael Rollins led MPD. MPD has faced difficulties with hiring and retention. Y'all remember, I told y'all about the Great Resign. Nearly 200 officers resigned in 2014 and 15, and numbers have declined further since then. The police department went from a high of 2,449 sworn officers in September 2011 to 1,798 officers in May 2024. Over the past several years, the city and MPD have focused on hiring more officers. Memphis is Memphis is a racially segregated city. Both North and South Memphis are predominantly black, while a string of majority white neighborhoods lead from downtown towards East Memphis and wealthier suburbs. And which is true. You literally got a whole little path where you got to have money. And it's a straight little shot. They're not lying, to come to think about it. Poverty is a major problem in Memphis. In 2021, the poverty rate in Memphis was 22.6%, well above the national average of 12.8% and the Tennessee average of 13.6%. Among Black residents, the poverty rate is 26.5%, and among Black children, the poverty rate is 37.6%. Memphis faced significant public safety challenges. Among American cities with more than 100,000 residents, Memphis had the third highest homicide rate and the highest rate of aggravated assaults in 2023. Departing from downward national trends, Memphis experienced an increase in violent crime in 2022 and 2023. In 2023, there were 397 homicides in Memphis, up to 301 homicides in 2022. Homicides and aggravated assault are often gun-related. From 2020 to 2023, for example, more than 90% of the city murders and more than 70% of the aggravated assaults involved guns. Damn. Y'all just out here. The violence harms community members, including youth. In 2023, 10 children were killed in Memphis, and nearly 170 children were treated for gunshot wounds. These harms are amplified by other challenges that residents face, including poverty. As one community leader told us, we have a trauma-dense community. MPD has struggled to solve violent crimes such as murders and non-fatal shootings. According to data submitted by MPD to the FBI, MPD arrested a suspect in just 28% of the murders in 2022 and 14% of the murders in 2023, far below the national average, national rate of 50%. MPD recently created a gun crimes unit to investigate non-fatal shootings. In 2023, that unit investigated more than 2,100 non-fatal shootings and made an arrest in 276 cases. That is bad. 276 cases out of 2,100. That is bad. I ain't gonna lie. That a clearance rate of 13%. Damn. A 2018 report by the National Public Safety Partnership found that caseloads for MPD homicide investigators were unsustainable. According to local prosecutors, MPD has skilled and dedicated investigators, but there are gaps in case files they receive, which they attribute to excessive caseloads and inexperience. Now, if people think like the hatred in this city for police just started, it didn't. It's been around for a while, and it's been growing with MPD for a while. It really has. I read this, and when I found out about it, I was like, what the hell? I didn't even hear about this guy. But this shit started back in the 60s, like during the real civil rights. It started back then. So it like Memphis has a long tradition of civil rights organizing and community engagement. In the 1960s, Memphians mobilized to challenge segregated schools and libraries, and sanitation workers went on strike for higher wages and better working conditions. I wasn't around, but I had to do a report on the sanitation strike, so I remember that though. In 1978, police officers and firefighters went on strike seeking improved conditions and benefits. Memphians have repeatedly raised concerns about policing practices. In 1971, Memphis police officer fatally beat a black teenager named Elton Hayes after a car chase. The officers were later acquitted, prompting widespread protests. 3 years later, police shot and killed 15-year-old Edward Garner, leading to the landmark Supreme Court case, Tennessee versus Garner, which held that officers cannot use deadly force against a person who is fleeing and pose no threat. More recently, in July of 2016, community members marched and occupied a major bridge in Memphis as a part of protest against police shootings. Community efforts, internal reforms, and legal actions have led to changes in MPD's practices over the years. Following the 1976 lawsuit over MPD's surveillance of activists, a federal court issued an order limiting how MPD collects information about political activists. The order remains in place today. In 1987, after an officer shot and killed a person experienced a mental health crisis, MPD created the Crisis Intervention Team, which they call it SIT, with specially trained officers who respond to mental health calls. MPD's SIT program, known as the Memphis Model, prompted other police departments across the country to establish similar teams. But damn it, we apparently lost the way some way. How the fuck we start the team and we're horrible at it. How the fuck we start the game? I'm mad about that. How the do we create the shit the whole country models after us, and now we the fuck? In 2020, former Mayor Strickland convened a reimagining policing project, resulting in a 2021 report with personal stories of community members who experienced excessive force and described distrust in the police. The report also called for new public safety measures like a collaborative system to send mental health crisis professionals to certain 911 calls. In January 2023, officers in MPD Scorpion unit fatally beat, pepper sprayed, and fired a taser at Tyree Nichols, a 29-year-old black man, during a traffic stop. The city released hours of unedited camera footage of officers' encounter with Mr. Nichols. MPD swiftly fired 7 officers, and Chief Davis disbanded the Scorpion unit, she said. That disbanding the unit is in the best interest of all. Disbanding the unit is in the best interest of all, and that MPD must take proactive steps in the healing process. MPD. We not the ones that we don't have to put in the work. That's y'all. We didn't just say we just hated y'all off the jump. We had to get to this point somehow. So healing? No. Admit y'all's fuck ups. We'll start there. The DOJ ain't finna lie on y'all with this shit I'm finna read. What they get out of it in the end. Hey, so now. All right, let's get to the findings. I think we have enough stats for now. Like, the findings is really where yeah. We have reasonable cause to believe that MPD and the city engaged in a pattern or practice of conduct that violates the Constitution and federal law. First, MPD uses excessive force. Second, MPD makes unlawful stops, searches, and arrests. Third, MPD unlawfully discriminates against Black people when enforcing the law. Fourth, city and MPD unlawfully discriminate when responding to people with behavioral health disabilities. The Memphis Police Department uses excessive force in violation of the Fourth Amendment. The use of excessive force violates the Fourth Amendment. The constitutionality of an officer's use of force is assessed under the objective reasonableness standard. This test must account for the totality of the circumstances surrounding the officer's use of force. In Memphis, the police department is responsible for addressing violent crimes, and officers face challenging circumstances that may threaten their safety or the safety of others. For that reason, the law requires that an officer's use of force be evaluated with regard to their underlying intent or motivation. To determine objective reasonableness, one must pay careful attention to the facts and circumstances of each particular case, including the severity of the crime at issue, whether the suspect poses an immediate threat to the safety of the officer or others, and whether he is actively resisting arrest or attempting to evade arrest by flight. These factors are not exhaustive. Other relevant considerations may include a person's diminished capacity or an officer's attempt to de-escalate an encounter. Y'all might want to take a drink too. review at random sample force incidents showed that MPD officers regularly escalated encounters involving nonviolent offenses and used unreasonable force against unarmed people who posed no threat. Officers punch, kick, and tackle people just moments into an encounter without justification. Officers use disproportionate force against people who have committed at most minor offenses such as traffic infractions, and use of force even after people are restrained. Officers use force, retaliate, and punish, especially when people talk back to them. MPD has used unreasonable deadly force, such as shooting at moving cars and using unjustified neck restraints. Officers also use force against people with behavioral health disabilities. Officers face little accountability when they use excessive force, and the commanders in place in the police department have ignored clear warning signs about its prevalence. I'm just telling y'all, do what y'all do. Smoke, drink, snort. I don't know, but y'all gonna need something. I'm drinking this to keep me alive. Shit. Cause baby, how the fuck y'all think I feel? And I'll share it once I get, I will share it so y'all can read it on your own. It is 73 pages. I am skipping some parts because there are parts that I really just want to point out that really highlight what I've been trying to tell people in this out here, what goes on in this city, because I see it. So, we evaluated MPD's use of both less lethal and deadly force. And they have a chart on there. And really, it's like 20. So physical force, they had responses of 2,341. Pepper spray and taser, they had reported of 454. For impact weapons and baton, 98. K9, 62. Shooting, 28. So that's the force that has been, or use of force that has been applied since January 1st of 2020 to September 22 of 2023. Those are the numbers. Memphis police officers regularly escalate situations and use severe excessive force against people suspected on nonviolent crimes, including traffic violations or shoplifting. A significant share of unreasonable force we found resulted from these types of encounters. Police officers are required to consider the totality of the circumstances when deciding whether and how to use force, including the severity of the alleged offense and if the person resisted. But MPD officers resort to force likely to cause pain or injury almost immediately in response to low-level nonviolent offenses, even when people are not aggressive. Trigger warning here, heavy trigger warning. In one incident, officers pepper sprayed, kicked, and fired a taser at an unarmed man who was with a man with mental illness because he tried to take a $2 soft drink from a gas station. Though the man abandoned the drink and left the store, an officer followed him to the edge of the parking lot, yelling at him to leave the area. As other MPD patrol cars arrived, the man put his hands in the air. Without warning, the officers grabbed his arms and shoved him against a squad car. 2 more officers arrived and surrounded the man. One officer kneed him in the side 4 times, then pulled him to the ground, pressed his forearm into his neck as the other officer struck him. The man screamed, "No, don't kill me," and then tried to run away. The officer fired his taser at him, which failed to incapacitate him. Another officer then held the man in a chokehold while the first officer pulled the taser's trigger to shock him again. The officer shocked the man 3 more times as he screamed in pain, including once when he was face down with his hands secured behind his back. By the end of the counter, at least 9 police cars and 12 MPD officers have responded to the scene of this attempted shoplifting of a fucking soft drink. The man was arrested and served 2 days in jail for theft and disorderly conduct. MPD's decision to emphasize traffic stop in its enforcement strategy while failing to properly supervise officers and review this strategy for impact has allowed for regular use of excessive force with impunity. In 196 incidents from 2018 to 2023, officers used force against people charged for driving without a valid license. In some incidents, officers appeared to punish people who tried to get away. During one incident, an officer punched the man in the face and then held his face in the ground after the man fled from the traffic stop. The man was a passenger in a car that MPD stopped for a tag violation. And when officers determined he had an open warrant, he ran. When officers cornered him and he appeared to surrender, one officer punched him in the face, wrapped his arms around his neck, and tackled him. The officer then pressed the man's face and neck into the ground while the other officer knelt on his back. The man, who was winded from running, said he could not breathe. The officer told him to shut up. In one incident, officers stopped the driver for speeding, handcuffed her, shoved her against the wall, and threatened to slam her to the ground. According to their report, officers saw her speeding and confronted her after she parked and was standing on the porch of a relative's home. They demanded her ID, and when she did not produce it, told her that she was going to jail. She told the officers they were not welcomed on the property and stepped back in. In response, they roughly grabbed her by her arms, handcuffed her, shoved her against the wall, and threatened to pepper spray her, slam her on the ground. After locking her in a police car, no one asked, so what did we see her do? And when the officer suggested the woman had improperly tinted windows, another officer responded, "All this for tent?" That's fucked up. That's fucked up. When your colleagues say, "Wait a minute, we just did all of this shit for tent." I'd be mad as hell. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. If I was hip hop, I would have been mad as hell. I ain't gonna lie. The officer shook his head and gestured with his hand that the woman talked too much. I'd be damned. Some traffic stops have resulted in force that even officers admitted was unnecessary. After officers tried to stop a car for driving with expired tags and failing to stop it at a stop sign, they followed the driver to her home and forced their way inside while her young child stood by crying. No exigent circumstances demanded they enter the woman's home, and the officers had no justification to use force to push their way inside of a non-violent traffic infraction. After the incident, one officer reflected, in the grand scheme of things, this does not seem like it was worth it. I'll be damned. The officer said, if it starts with, he basically said, me and eater is not worth it. Basically, he was saying, if it's a fucking misdemeanor, it's not worth it. Yeah, they snatched her out of her shit. MPD use unjustified neck restraints. Neck restraints include chokeholds, strangleholds, or maneuvers that apply pressure to a person's neck or throat in a way that limits air or blood flow. The restraints can cause permanent brain damage, stroke, cognitive impairment, and even death. Since 2019, Tennessee law has banned officers from using certain neck restraints unless deadly force is justified. For such tactics to be permissible under MPD policy, officers must believe there's an imminent danger of death or seriously bodily injury to the officer or a third person. MPD policy makes no exception for the use of hands, knees, feet, or one's body weight to restrict a subject's ability to breathe. Despite these prohibitions, the MPD officers regularly use unlawful restraints, sometimes repeatedly in a single incident. Officers use unreasonable neck restraints when responding to low-level offenses. In one case, 3 officers tackled a man who had littered in a public park. Littered, if you didn't hear that, held him down and applied pressure to the back of his neck for about 20 seconds. The man had done nothing wrong, but was talking all this shit, according to one officer, and would not tell the officers his name. When the man dropped his drink while leaving the park, 4 officers surrounded him. The man said he just wanted to go home, and the officer responded, "The way you want it to go, it's not going to go." Seconds after telling him to put his hands behind his back, the officers converged on the man, piling on top of him and holding him down by the neck. While handcuffed in the patrol car later on, the man told a lieutenant that he was just trying to follow the officer's directions, but they had already decided to charge him. I even offered to pick up the can. Not when you hear the other numbers. It's systematic. It's systematic. MPD officers also use unjustified neck restraints on people exhibiting symptoms of behavioral health crises. In one case, officers offered a ride home to a man at a gas station experienced paranoid delusions that someone wanted to kill him. The man accepted the ride, but while he was waiting in the squad car, the officers discovered he had a misdemeanor warrant for theft. They pulled him from the car to arrest him, telling him, "You're fixing to get your ass whooped." When he tried to get away, they repeatedly punched him in the head and body, then wrapped an arm around his neck to pull him to the ground and pressed his head and neck into the pavement. In another such incident, officers used unlawful neck restraints to subdue an intoxicated man who was on his hands and knees in the hotel hallway, yelling incoherently and spitting. As officers approached, the man struggled to his feet and grabbed one of the officers' arm. In response, officers grabbed him by the neck. One pressed a baton across his throat. Then they forced him to the ground, pressed on the back of his neck for 10 more seconds. When they relieved the pressure, the man sobbed and screamed, "You choked me." One officer silenced him by gripping his throat and squeezing. The officers then held him against the wall by the neck while applying handcuffs. And again, after he urinated on himself, he was transported to the hospital by ambulance for psychiatric evaluation. He was not charged with any crimes. MPD uses unreasonable force on people who are restrained or under control. MPD officers punch, kick, and use other force against people who are already handcuffed or restrained. The gratuitous use of force against a person who has surrendered is unconstitutional. We found many incidents in which officers used unreasonable force against people who were restrained. In nearly all of them, supervisors approved the use of force. One officer hit a handcuffed man in the face and torso with a baton 8 times. In a different incident, officers kicked a woman in the chest 3 times while she was handcuffed in the back of a squad car. In another case, officers punched a man in the throat while he was handcuffed to a chair. Officers repeatedly permitted police dogs to bite or continue to bite people, including children, who were non-resistant or attempting to surrender. And yes, you heard that right. They had the K9 bite kids. Yep, you heard that. You heard that. When officers use force punitively, other officers or supervisors often do not intervene. One officer choked, pepper sprayed, or repeatedly struck the handcuffed man with a baton because the man did not immediately follow his directions. Officers arrested the man after responding to a 911 call for domestic assault, handcuffed him, and walked him to a police car. The man stood calmly next to the police car but refused to get into it. The arresting officer became enraged, grabbed him by the shirt, bashed him against the frame of the car, and hit him twice with a baton as he shoved him inside. When the man began to kick the door of the squad car, the officer screamed, "Kick my motherfucking door again." The man kicked the door again, and the officer charged back, climbed into the back seat atop of the man, and pepper sprayed him in the face at close range. The officer then dragged him out of the car and held him in a chokehold for 20 seconds while the man's family stood screaming at the officer to stop. Officers forced the man back into the squad car and closed the windows. When the man said he could not breathe, the officer who sprayed him responded, "I don't give a fuck." Other officers were present the entire time and did not intervene. MPD officers reviewed the incidents and found no violation policies. We reviewed incidents in which officers unreasonably pepper sprayed people secured in police cars. Though MPD policy explicitly prohibits the use of pepper spray against a person who is being transported in a police car. One officer told a man he had been arrested for shoplifting that he was going to beat his ass and take him to the woods instead of jail. He then pepper sprayed him while he was handcuffed and secured in the back of the squad car. His lieutenant responded to the scene and told him, "Next time, spray somebody in the sunlight." Though she reviewed body-worn cam footage, she told her chain of command that the officer had complied with MPD policy. Her report made no mention of the officer's threats. Told y'all. You got supervisors covering for them. Then you got supervisors. The whole chain of command is covered for everybody. MPD K9 unit trains dogs to bite suspects immediately after they locate them and hold the bite until the handler directs them to release. In practice, this results in unnecessary and unreasonably long bites that hurt people who are not a threat. MPD officers have allowed canines to bite people, including teenagers who were trying to surrender. One MPD officer commanded his dog to bite a person who was sleeping. Another dog bit a 17-year-old arm for at least 30 seconds as he begged the officers to release the dog. Teenager was taken to Children's Hospital for treatment. These bites were unnecessary and unreasonable because the people posed no threat to the dog or their handlers. One training officer told us that officers often need to insert a device into the dog's mouth to get the dog to release the bite, indicating that they do not reliably release on command. Even though MPD policy limits use of dogs to cases with felony suspects, we reviewed an incident in which an officer released the dog to apprehend a man suspected in shoplifting household items. The dog bit the man multiple times, causing injuries that required hospitalization. Supervisors found no wrongdoing. MPD's use of less lethal weapon violates the law. Memphis police officers unreasonably use less lethal weapons such as tasers and pepper spray, often without first attempting to resolve situations peacefully. Of the 2,669 reported less lethal force incidents between January 2022 and September of 2023, MPD officer used a taser or pepper spray in at least 454 of them. Officers have used taser and pepper spray recklessly, and they have accidentally discharged these weapons at other officers or themselves. Justin, you bitch ass fat ass, that was you. You the only one tasing other officers. Shit, dumbass. Tasers and pepper spray can cause intense pain and can incapacitate a person. Tasers have two modes. In probe mode, an officer fires darts into a person's body, which delivers an electrical shock that causes severe pain, temporarily overrides the person's central nervous system, and paralyzes the person's muscles. In dry stun mode, an officer presses the taser directly against the person's body, which causes severe pain but does not paralyze the person. Pepper spray is a chemical irritant that induces intense burning sensation in the eyes and forces them to close and flood with tears. Pepper spray works almost instantly and can cause coughing fits and difficulty breathing. Officers make light of these risks these weapons pose, and some lack proper understanding in how to use these weapons. Oh yeah, this shit I read. Well, I don't know if it's on this section. If it's not, yeah, it is. Okay. Make light of the risks these weapons pose, and some lack the proper understanding how to use these weapons. In one incident, an officer dry stunned a man without warning and laughed at him, prompting another officer to joke, "What is that, like your 18th fucking confirmed tasing?" On a different occasion, a crisis intervention team, SIT, officer tased a 13-year-old twice and told his lieutenant that the boy do not need to go to the hospital because I just did a dry stun. I didn't tase him. In one incident we reviewed, an officer observed that tasers would be effective to try to get people to comply with police orders, and then mime someone being electrocuted with buzzing noise. The voltage changes a lot. The taser changes a lot. Another officer equipped with pepper spray admitted she did not know how to use it. While breaking up a fight at a high school, she's asking others, "So you got to lift the hood up and spray?" I just don't know the policy. Can I just spray the shit like that? You know what? Maybe you just there for a check. I ain't even gonna roast you. Maybe you just there for a check. I don't know. How the fuck you gonna break up fights though? We reviewed all 18 Memphis police shootings in 2018 through 2022. A significant number of them involved officers firing into cars or moving vehicles without justification. Shooting a moving vehicle is deadly force and therefore permissible only when officers have probable cause to believe the suspect poses an immediate threat of serious physical harm to the officer or another person. It is also highly dangerous because it presents risks of an uncontrolled vehicle. MPD officers have fired at moving cars without justification. An officer may be justified to use deadly force against a driver who objectively appears ready to drive into an officer or bystander with his car, but that justification ends once that car moves away, leaving the officers and bystanders in a position of safety. MPD officers have disregarded tactical basics and placed themselves in dangerous and avoidable situations when approaching cars. Where a police officer unreasonably placed himself in harm's way, his use of deadly force may be deemed excessive. In one shooting, an officer fired at a car at least 8 times at a fast food drive-thru in the middle of the day, jeopardizing other officers and bystanders. The officer had alerted to a stolen car, and 2 police officers approached from different directions trying to box the car in. Once officers got out of the car and ran towards the suspect car, but tripped and fell. One officer got suspect's car, moved slowly out of his car and ran towards the suspect car, but tripped and fell to the ground as the suspect car moved slowly in his direction. As he regained his footing and jumped out of the car's path, another officer fired twice at the car. The officer fired another 6 rounds after his partner had retreated to safety, including the final 2 as the suspect car slowly came to a rest behind a brick wall. He continued to fire after the car no longer presented a threat. The officer used unreasonable force and unnecessarily placed bystanders and officers in harm's way. MPD investigation improperly found that this use of deadly force was justified. MPD's deficient policies and training contribute to excessive force. MPD's deficient policies and training fail to advise officers on the constitutional requirements for using force. MPD's use of force policies are missing critical elements like the basic legal requirement that force must be proportionate in light of severity of the offense and the threat to the officer's face. Instead, MPD policies suggest that force may be necessary if persons non-compliant prevent officers from accomplishing their duties in a timely manner. The desire to resolve an interaction quickly does not justify the use of force. As described above, we reviewed multiple incidents in which MPD officers used force unnecessarily just because a person did not follow their commands. Hurt them first and hurt them bad. This is something the lieutenant said. MPD training primes officers to believe that force is the most likely way to end an encounter. Some training feature inappropriate imagery alongside statements that encourage officers to use force. For example, one training's imagery on a de-escalation implies that if officers can physically overpower a person, they should do that first rather than talking to them. Another training instructs officers if a fight is unavoidable, hurt them first and hurt them bad. Even if the force becomes necessary, the force must be reasonable and proportional to the circumstances. The severity of the offense, the degree of the resistance, and the size or stature of the person and the officer are relevant considerations. Throughout the encounter, police should continually reassess the situation, threats, and risks. MPD's is Donna, you good. MPD to use severe force misconstrue actions like failure to provide identification as resistance, and some officers stated views that back-talking or criticizing the police is resistance. Officers may then perceive a person's passive noncompliance or words as a threat that warrant force, including severe force. So if you talk smart to them, that's, yeah. Officers also receive inadequate training on de-escalation skills that can reduce or avoid uses of force altogether. De-escalation refers to verbal and nonverbal tactics that officers use to slow down interactions and reduce the likelihood of a use of force. De-escalation is a cornerstone of modern SIT programs, and many de-escalation training programs are specifically designed to help officers respond to dynamic situations, especially when interacting with people exhibiting symptoms of behavioral health crisis. Officer told the DOJ that they found the training they received from MPD to be inadequate. Some believe that the specialized training for recruits on defensive tactics and handcuffing techniques left them ill prepared. One officer remarked that recruits feel more comfortable shooting than fighting hand to hand, and that as a recruit, he received no training on using teamwork to bring people into custody. He said officers don't learn what you do when you go to handcuff somebody and someone decides to swing on you. You know what? I'll let them slide on that. Because if they're getting shitty training, it absolutely, I mean, yeah. But it's also because of weak ass oversight. That's the next portion. Weak oversight contributes to excessive force. Although MPD policy requires officers to report force, officers oftentimes minimize the seriousness of the fuck. There you go. Of the force they use. Part of this is due to MPD policy. MPD lumps together vastly different actions by officers under the category of empty hand control, which encompasses everything from soft empty hand techniques like grabbing a person too hard, empty hand techniques like punches, kicks, and strikes, and officers' use of force reports both soft and hard. Empty hand techniques are reported simply as physical force. A punch or kick to the head receives the same review from the chain of command and grabbing a person armed does. But we also found that in their reports, officers regularly omit information from the number of times they use force or the kind of force they used. Frontline supervisors handle the initial determinations about whether use of force are reasonable and comply with MPD policy. These supervisors' reviews are cursory, often endorsing conduct without any discussion of the facts. MPD requires supervisors to review body-worn camera, video, and to write a memo if they find that the use of force is out of policy. There's no requirement for supervisors to explain their determination that the use of force is within policy. In our random sample of force incidents, supervisors rarely flag potential policy violation in incidents that we determine involved excessive force. Finally, MPD fails to analyze data meaningfully to determine whether there are patterns of behavior that require training or other remediation. MPD publishes annual reports that provide data about internal investigations and purport identity patterns that might suggest problems with training, equipment, and policy. The 2022 annual report offered no recommendations as to policy changes, but no significant trends or patterns were observed. So y'all didn't find one, but the DOJ did, I guess. Okay. But it stated that management must make sure they review and response to resistant reports. This was only slightly different from the 2021 annual report, which stated that management must ensure that subordinates are submit reports in a timely manner. Excessive force is routine in MPD. Officers use force as a first resort, demand unquestioning obedience, and exact punishment if they do not receive it. Supervisors do not address these recurrent practices, and some at MPD defend these practices. One field training officer, told us we're not excessive enough with these criminals. We baby them. MPD's pattern of excessive force undermines community trust. It takes a toll in the form of intense physical and emotional pain for the victims as well as the families and friends. One victim of excessive force told officers, "Y'all attacked me, knocked me down in front of my kid, busted my house. Y'all ain't understanding my pain. This is trauma." MPD conducts unlawful stops, searches, and arrests. We have reasonable cause to believe that MPD engages in pattern or practice of making stops, searches, and arrests that violate the Fourth Amendment. During minor traffic and pedestrian stops, MPD officers conduct unjustified frisk and more intrusive searches or handcuff and hold people in patrol vehicles just to write a simple citation. At times, officers unnecessarily prolong these stops or search and seize the driver's vehicle. MPD officers also make unlawful arrests for low-level offenses such as arresting people for disorderly conduct, even as they are following officers' instructions and commands. Our findings are based on a variety of evidence. We interviewed MPD officers and supervisors and observed their activities during ride-alongs, reviewed MPD policies and training materials concerning stops, searches, and arrests. We analyzed a random sample of traffic stops from 2021 to 2023, as well as random sample arrests for minor offenses such as disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, loitering, and curfew violations from 2022 to 2023. For each incident in our sample, we examined officer body-worn camera footage and all available documentation for evidence of the investigation. We also reviewed dozens of complaints and internal affairs investigations, use of force investigation, and court cases involving stops, searches, and evidence because of MPD's unconstitutional conduct. And we interviewed judges, judicial commissioners, prosecutors, and defense attorneys, as well as community members who have been impacted by MPD practices. The pattern of the Fourth Amendment violation stems from MPD's decision to prioritize traffic enforcement as a central method to address crime in Memphis, while at the same time failing to ensure that officers understand and follow constitutional requirements when they stop and detain people. MPD officers face pressure to make stops. Many of these traffic stops involve documentation or equipment violations like broken tail lights or expired tags. MPD's data show that 2018 to 2023, more than half of MPD's citations involve documentation or equipment violations. The chart below shows traffic citations in more detail. This data does not include the hundreds of thousands of traffic stops that did not result in citation because MPD officers do not document reason for those stops. Majority of each year is for documentation. MPD. Oh, and here's another thing that was kind of addressed. They do not have a quota thing, but they do have this thing. It's not a quota. It's not. But they know what the fuck they be doing. MPD's STAT program is STATS, STATS program, is designed to measure each officer's productivity against the productivity of other officers at the same station and shift. Productivity metrics include stops, citation, and arrests. And officers' continued failure to meet average productivity of the officer's shift may result in discipline, and supervisors have counseled officers based on their lack of citation. A former MPD supervisor told us that for officers, a traffic stop shows you did something during your shift. 2 tickets a day keep the lieutenants away. The supervisor described the stats program as a joke that turned patrol enforcement into a contest or a game in which supervisors pitted officers against each other, and officers made stops to generate stats rather than address the public safety needs. That's where that shit got started. That's where that shit got. No, because a lot of people were straight up said, no, they got a quota. No, it's not a quota. This shit started off as a fucking joke, and now look. Such deficiencies have led to officers routinely failing to justify stops with reasonable suspicion. Judges, prosecutors, and defense attorneys all raise concern about MPD's over-reliance on high crime areas as justification for stop. Police may consider the relevant characteristics of a location in determining whether the circumstances are suspicious to warrant further investigation. But police must do more than just label a behavior as suspicious. A person's presence in a high crime area without additional factors does not justify a stop. MPD officers stopped one driver in a high crime area because he backed into a parking spot at a gas station store and left the car running. A federal court found officers had no reason to stop him aside from the man's legal method of parking. The detectives could point to no other factors that they believed to be suspicious in a separate incident involving a stop and seizure by the MPD officer. A federal magistrate concluded that a man's presence in a high crime area, refusal to show his hands, and backward movement viewed together fall short of meeting the reasonable suspicion requirement. Charges against the man were dismissed. In another incident, MPD unlawfully detained 4 black teenagers after reports that 4 black males were prowling near car doors in a majority white, affluent neighborhood of Memphis. When the officers saw the teens, they immediately stopped them, frisked them, searched their pockets, and detained them in patrol cars. The woman who reported the teens admitted to officers she seen no crime. The group looked kind of suspicious to me, but I don't know. Still, the officers kept them locked in a patrol car for nearly an hour. One officer seemed to recognize that the children had been profiled based on their age and race, telling one 15-year-old boy, "You know why they called, right? They saw you all, I guess, prowling around the car." That's what they said. "We didn't see shit, all right?" But that's what people are saying when you're walking around the neighborhood, and whether you actually were or weren't, it's optics. In another incident, we reviewed an officer unlawfully detained a black man who complained about the officer. After receiving a traffic citation, the man was free to go, and he got out the car and loudly complained about the officer as he walked away through the parking lot. The man was not engaging in dangerous or threatening behavior, but the officer followed him and handcuffed him anyway. The man objected. "I have freedom of speech. I can say what I want to say. The officer is just messing with me." The officer then frisked and searched the man and threatened to take him to jail, but instead issued a misdemeanor citation for disorderly conduct. Prosecutors declined to prosecute the disorderly conduct charge. MPD officers are routinely handcuff and detain people in their patrol vehicles during stops, even when the initial stop is lawful. Police may not keep someone longer than necessary to complete the purpose of a stop. Unless they are making arrests, they may not handcuff or hold a person in a patrol car unless they have a specific reason to believe a person poses a danger or flight risk. MPD officers, however, handcuff and detain people in routine traffic stops without a lawful basis. For example, officers stopped a young black woman for expired tags, found out she had a revoked license, and ordered her to get out the car. The woman was compliant and cooperative throughout the encounter, but the officers frisked her for weapons, handcuffed her, and held her in the backseat of a patrol car for nearly 25 minutes as they wrote a misdemeanor citation. One officer seemed to recognize that the handcuffed young woman posed no threat and told her, "You seem sweet," after she said she had never been handcuffed before. MPD provides minimal supervision of officer stops. Supervisors rarely review stops unless the stop results in arrest or complaint, and they rarely examine the basis for a citation. Supervisors must approve arrests, but one MPD commander explained that some supervisors just push a button and approve without careful review. An officer told us that officers who make bad stops rarely get caught unless someone files a complaint. But even when the community members complain to MPD, reviewers often do not identify or discipline officers for problematic stops, searches, detention, and arrests. For example, when a black woman complained to Internal Affairs that after being pulled over for speeding and tinted windows, she was ordered out of her vehicle, pat searched, and detained in the squad car during the traffic stop. The investigator did not investigate the incident. Instead, the investigator informed the woman that it is the officer's discretion to detain the individual in his squad car during a lawful traffic stop. The investigator did not acknowledge that to detain a person in a squad car during a routine traffic stop, the law requires there must be sufficient facts that suggest that he felt threatened. This shit, wow. MPD does not require officers to record when they frisk or search people, which means police leaders cannot assess how common the practices are. Even when officers do record their actions, they often do not cite specific facts that support their conduct. For example, in one incident in which an officer stopped the driver for improper tags, handcuffed the driver, searched the car, and searched the driver's purse inside the vehicle, the officer report did not mention any of these activities. In another incident, in which officers were responding to a call about a car in an abandoned home, the officers similarly failed to document that they had handcuffed, frisked, and searched the occupant of the car and searched the car. Supervisors, therefore, are not easily able to review and assess whether officers were engaging in unlawful conduct during these frisk and searches. This lack of documentation also prevents MPD leadership from assessing whether MPD's search practices are legal and effective. And I think they're doing that on purpose. I'm going to be honest. I think they're doing that shit on purpose. Officers also frisk and search people after stopping them on the street. After stopping a black man for walking into traffic, officers immediately bent the man over on the hood of the patrol car, patted him down, manipulated the outside of the man's pockets, and reached inside. The officers noted in their pocket that the man was a known panhandler, but did not mention or seek to justify the frisk or search. They released him 20 minutes later with a citation. In another incident, when the officer stopped 3 black teenagers for a curfew violation in downtown Memphis, the officer frisked all the boys, even though he had no reason to believe they were armed or dangerous. The boys, who were suspected of nothing more than a curfew violation, were compliant and had not tried to reach or conceal anything in their pockets before he began frisking them. And the officer's report did not mention or justify the frisk. Body cavity searches implicate greater constitutional concerns than the searches of a person's clothing and generally require a warrant. MPD policy requires a warrant to conduct an inspection, probing, or examination of the inside of a person's anus, vagina, or genitals. MPD officers ignore these requirements and conduct invasive searches in public view. And I know they're not lying because I've seen the shit with my own eyes. They made that man drop his shit in broad daylight, bend over, and cough. Yeah. In one incident, MPD officers seemed to believe a more intrusive search was warranted to catch bigger fish. During the zero tolerance operation in a high crime and known drug area, officers saw 2 men who had been standing on a corner walk away when the patrol car approached. Finding these actions suspicious, officers detained, handcuffed, frisked, and searched the men. During the search, one officer asked, "Did you check their ass crack yet?" And the other officer responded, "Yes." Both men complained that the officers searched their rectums. The officers were not disciplined for their searches. I told y'all it was bad. I gotta smoke, y'all. Y'all might have to go off camera for a second, but I'm gonna come back. Cause this shit here, hell, y'all smoke them if you got them, baby. Cause this one is important because they do this shit too, and they know what they be doing. MPD unlawfully searches and seizes cars. To search a car, officers must have probable cause to believe they will find evidence of a crime. Police also can search vehicles when they make an arrest, when there's a reason to believe a person is armed and dangerous, when evidence is in plain view of the officers, and if they take lawful possession of the car. Although officers may ask a person to waive those requirements and consent to a search, the consent must be voluntary and not the product of police coercion. During traffic stops for minor violations, MPD officers violate people's rights by illegally searching their vehicles. For example, officers stopped a man for driving without tags on his car, told him to get out his car, then, without explanation or warning, frisked the man and held him in the backseat of a locked patrol car. Officers then searched the man's car, including opening the glove compartment and looking under the seat. Finding nothing, the officer issued the man a citation and released him more than 30 minutes later. The officer's report did not mention the search. When MPD officers seek consent to search vehicles, they will conduct searches even when consent is not given. Yeah, that's the problem. They're not listening to any fucking thing here. Upper thought, they do what the fuck they want. That's the problem. They search your shit after you done told them no 20 damn times. And folks wonder why, like this, all of this shit makes sense. People wonder why the criminals is getting out. Well, look at how the fucking police is doing. First of all, you got to start there. They're not helping the case by shitty ass police work and not doing the basic of who, what, when, where, and why. So then when they get in front of these judicial commissioners and these judges, the judges is like, what the fuck, police? Y'all ain't got a shit. Let them go. So then it's a fucking come on. Like all of this ties together, and like it makes sense now. Once I've read this report, it was eye opening. It was fucked up because I legit was crying because of what they did to the people with mental health crisis ordeals. Like that shit really bothered me. It did. I'm not gonna lie about that. And the numbers itself, you can see the racism. You can. And it's crazy as hell because it's the black cops doing it. When a person agrees to a search, they must do so voluntarily. MPD policy informs officers that consent must be unequivocal, specific, and free of duress. MPD officers seek consent to search under coercive conditions, such as when a person is handcuffed and has been threatened with jail, and they search even when consent is unclear. In a traffic stop for tinted windows, the officers asked the black driver to get out the car, reached into the man's pocket, and telling the man he was not under arrest, handcuffed him. When the officer asked if he could look in the car, the man replied, You the police. Another officer responded, he's just being generous. Technically, we can search it. Technically, you're under arrest. He's just being nice. Though the officers did not have probable cause for a search, they searched the car for 3 minutes without finding anything and releasing him with a citation. Searches based on the odor of marijuana. While officers often justify vehicle and pedestrian searches based on statements that they smelled the odor of marijuana, courts and MPD's own internal affairs units have found that those justifications are not always credible. Surprise, surprise. Officers will, for example, write in reports that they smelled marijuana, but there are no mention of the odor of marijuana on body cam footage. A prosecutor described MPD's explanations as sometimes cringy. It's fucked up when you got the prosecutor saying, nah, this shit cringy as hell. That's fucked up. And gave the example of an officer claiming to have smelled marijuana in a car that was going 60 miles per hour. That's right, you heard it, folks. An officer pulled and arrested somebody because he said he smelled a car that was going fucking 60 miles. Y'all heard that. Contrary to MPD's own policies, officers tow cars that are legally parked or when family members or other licensed drivers are available to drive the car. MPD impounds hundreds of cars each month, and for a stretch in 2022, the police department impounded more than 1,000 cars per month. Chief David defended the tactic of seizing cars, explaining that when drivers engage in reckless driving and endangering others, we want to take your car too. Even if it gets the case dropped in court, you might be inconvenienced for 3 days without your car. That's enough. But the unlawful seizure of cars can have long-term negative impacts, as a car may be a person's lifeline, including a way to maintain employment. In Memphis, the process of recovering a car once impounded is expensive and onerous. Drivers can be charged a $225 towing fee, a $75 impound fee, and a storage rate of $30 daily. Drivers even face higher expenses when their cars are seized as a part of investigation, including a $350 bond to prevent automatic forfeiture. Retrieving a car can cost more than the actual value of the car. I ain't gonna call it a dumbass, but that was a dumbass move. Anyway, my ex get her taxes, right? Her truck had got impounded because she was at her friend's house. I'm gonna put heavy quotation because she might have been doing some. She got caught cheating on me. All right, but she was at somebody's house, and the dude was walking down the street. He saw police, and he chucked the bag in her truck. Let her tell it. Okay, it could have been different. I don't know. Let her tell it. Officers pulled down on him. They recognize him. They see him because they know he has an active warrant. They asked her, what he hand you? She said, nothing. They was like, can we search the truck? She said, yeah. Well, they found the weed. Took her, took him, and the truck to jail. We call it jail. Took her, him, and the truck to jail. Do y'all know it was a QX? It was the truck, the Infinity truck, the old school junk. And I'm like, leave that. You're gonna spend $3,000 to get that out of impound. Sure shit, she spends $3,000 to get it out of impound. It breaks down a month later. So yeah, it can get high. In 2019, a federal court found that MPD's decision to tow a car was improper and the subsequent search was unconstitutional when officers violated MPD policy by failing to present a driver with alternatives to towing and failing to contact a supervisor before deciding to tow the car. Still, MPD has continued to tow cars without offering alternatives. In one incident we reviewed, an officer stopped a car for a tag violation and later towed the car because a teenager in the backseat cursed at him. The officer admitted to the other officers that he towed the car because the girl started cussing. There goes that retaliation. MPD makes unlawful arrest. Under the Fourth Amendment, arrests must be supported by probable cause, which requires a probability or substantial chance of criminal activity. Each year, MPD makes thousands of arrests for nonviolent misdemeanor offenses such as trespassing, disorderly conduct, panhandling, curfew violations, drug possession, drug paraphernalia, public intoxication, and vandalism. Unlike arrests for more serious violent crimes, officers have significant discretion on how to handle such low-level violations, such as whether to make an arrest, issue a citation, or let them off with a warning. MPD officers abuse that discretion, arrest people for minor offenses without probable cause, and at times in apparent retaliation or to justify the officer's own conduct. Adults who are arrested are transported to jail where county magistrates review their charges, while children who are arrested for low-level offenses often receive a summons to appear in juvenile court. MPD officers, for example, unlawfully arrest people for disorderly conduct even when they are complying with officers' instructions and are not threatening or dangerous. In one incident involving a traffic stop for improperly displayed tags, officers arrested a 20-year-old black driver for disorderly conduct and failure to obey police officers even though the young man followed the officers' instructions. The young man had been standing in the street speaking up with officers for several minutes when one officer told him to get out the street. The man complained but moved out the street toward his car. As the man was walking out of the street, the officer grabbed and handcuffed him. Because the officer grabbed the man, the officer decided that he needed to be taken into custody. He got a ride because we put our hands on him. The young man was released from jail the next day, and prosecutors declined to pursue the charges. In another incident, officers charged a black woman with resisting arrest when she criticized the officers who stopped her. Officers pulled her over driving with expired tags and instructed her to get out the car. The woman stayed in her seat, called the two white officers racist, as she wanted to call her grandmother. When she tried to make a phone call, one officer slapped the phone away, grabbed her by her arm, and shoved her against the car to handcuff her. Y'all being aggressive. Y'all racist, she said. Now you're going to jail, an officer said, and put her into a patrol car. Although she never used force against the officer, one said, we're going to have to charge her with resisting. Prosecutors declined to pursue those charges. During another traffic stop, officers arrested a black woman for disorderly conduct and resisting arrest when she talked back to them during the arrest of her boyfriend. The woman had committed no crime and caused no disturbance other than yelling at the officers, and the woman later complained to MPD, while Internal Affairs later noted that there were questionable probable cause. They did not investigate the arrest. Prosecutors declined to pursue those charges. Judges and prosecutors, we spoke to express concerns with the legality of MPD's arrest, but these concerns have not led to MPD to meaningfully change its practices. A prosecutor said that some supervisors do not take the time to review arrests. Some people would sign anything and might not have sufficient training to recognize whether probable cause exists. A judicial commissioner noted that they must often remind officers that probable cause is needed to conduct a search warrant or arrest. Another judicial commissioner gave an example of one officer who submitted about 6 versions of the same probable cause affidavit, many of which factually contradicted other versions. You heard that right. The man submitted 6 different fucking stories, and each one contradicted the other one. A judge expressed frustration that the MPD officers who have the power to take away a person's liberty are sometimes unable to write a police report establishing probable fucking cause. And I added the fucking in there. That ain't really, but damn. Oh, yeah. All right. MPD unlawfully discriminates against black people in its enforcement. We have reasonable cause to believe that MPD engages in racial discrimination in violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Safe Streets Act. These laws prohibit police practices that discriminate on the basis of race. We examined MPD's enforcement of low-level minor offenses where officers have more discretion over whether to stop, cite, and arrest people. MPD's own data showed that across a range of different law enforcement agencies, MPD treats black people more harshly than white people when they engage in similar conduct. These disparities are driven by MPD saturation style enforcement of low-level offenses, including traffic violations with limited supervision and safeguards. MPD stops and citations impose a heavy burden on Memphians, especially on those who have been stopped repeatedly. But MPD has never meaningfully assessed whether these practices are effective or necessary to address the violent crime, or whether they result in discriminatory treatment. MPD engages in racially disparate enforcement. We examined records from MPD's 911 system and a data recording stops and arrests to determine whether MPD officers similarly situated people differently without a reasonable basis to do so. We base our analyses on officers' own descriptions of people's conduct. When they measured officers' actions against reliable benchmarks to understand how officers treat people of different races who engage in the same conduct. These analyses allow us to rule out alternative explanations for racial disparities and assess the role of race in how MPD enforces the law. We found that MPD treats Black people more harshly than white people who engage in similar conduct. MPD enforces law more aggressively against Black drivers in Black neighborhoods. Each year, MPD officers cite thousands of drivers for moving violations, such as speeding or running a red light, but officers treat people engaged in similar driving behavior differently, due in part to race. We designed this analysis to find similarly situated drivers who engaged in dangerous driving behavior at similar locations and times of day. We first identified a pool of drivers engaged in dangerous driving behavior that led to crashes. We then compared the data set to citations MPD officers issued to drivers for moving violations along the same stretch of road around the same time of day. If MPD enforced traffic laws without regard to race, we would expect officers to treat drivers whose dangerous driving led to crashes similarly to drivers whose dangerous driving lead to traffic stops. Instead, we found MPD is 21% more likely to cite Black drivers for moving violations as compared to white drivers who engaged in dangerous driving that led to at-fault crashes in the same place and time. The discrimination is compounded because MPD enforces traffic laws more intensely in predominantly Black neighborhoods than the majority non-Black neighborhoods with similar levels of vehicle crashes. For example, predominantly Black neighborhoods experience 33.2% more moving violation enforcement as compared to majority non-Black neighborhoods with similar crash rates. In other words, MPD's more intense moving violation enforcement in Black neighborhoods cannot be explained by the differences in dangerous driving. MPD officers are more likely to arrest or cite Black people for drug offenses than white people who they describe as engaging in similar conduct. We analyzed MPD data regarding incidents in which officers encountered people using drugs and then compared how officers treated people of different races in those encounters. We identified these similarly situated people based on officers' own report. We designed this analysis to rule out factors other than race. This analysis only compared to people who were accused by officers of engaging in similar types of conduct as described by the officer themselves. If race did not factor into the officer's decision making, then we would expect the outcome of those encounters to be close to the same. Instead, we found that the officers are 17% more likely to cite or arrest Black people for drug-related offenses as compared to white people who are described by officers as engaging in the same conduct. MPD arrests black people for marijuana possession at more than 5 times the rate of white people. We also found disparities in MPD's enforcement of laws prohibiting the possession of marijuana. Data on drug arrests can compare to relevant benchmarks on drug use to evaluate whether MPD enforces drug laws disproportionately. Public health data show that black people and white people use marijuana at similar rates. If MPD enforced marijuana possession laws without regard to race, we would expect that black and white people in Memphis would be charged with marijuana possession violations at roughly equal rates. But that's not what the data shows. Instead, we found that MPD cites or arrests black people for marijuana possession at 5.2 times the rate of white adults based on MPD's data from 2018 to 2023. MPD disproportionately cites black drivers for minor traffic offenses. MPD traffic stops often involve equipment or documentation violations rather than dangerous driving behavior. MPD disproportionately cite black drivers for minor traffic offenses such as improper tags, tinted windows, faulty tail lights, and other equipment violations as compared to their share of the residential population. Overall, MPD cites black drivers for equipment violations at 4.5 times the rate of white drivers based on their share of the residential population. Black drivers receive citations for improperly tinted windows at 9.8 times the rate of white drivers, and for defective lights at 6.1 times the rate of white drivers. Nearly 90% of MPD's equipment violations and citations were of black drivers. While these per capita disparities do not conclusively establish discrimination, in part because the population driving with equipment violations may not match the residential population, the per capita disparities in minor traffic offenses are significant enough to suggest discriminatory treatment. Moreover, the enforcement is most intense where black people live. In neighborhoods with a black population of 75% or more, MPD stops people at a rate that is 18% higher than in neighborhoods that are not majority black. If predominantly black neighborhoods had experienced the same traffic stop rate as neighborhoods that are not majority black, then MPD would have made 12,368 fewer traffic stops per year over the past 5 years. MPD disproportionately cites or arrests black people for highly discretionary misdemeanor offenses. These stark disparities extend to the other discretionary misdemeanor offenses. For example, MPD cites or arrests black people for loitering or curfew violations at 13 times the rate of white people. And MPD cites or arrests black people for disproportionate conduct at 3.6 times the rate of white people. MPD's enforcement of low-level discretionary offenses also impacts black youth in Memphis. Keep that. You remember what I told y'all in the beginning. Please tomorrow join me and Dutch. I will go more into this about how this actually ties into that. So please make sure you join us tomorrow for that. From January 2018 through August of 2023, MPD arrested 180 black children for loitering or curfew violations as compared to just 4 white children. MPD arrested 120 black children for disorderly conduct as compared to 1 white child. Discriminatory policing in Memphis is driven by MPD's poorly supervised traffic-based saturation strategy, flooding black neighborhoods with intense enforcement of traffic and nonviolent offenses. Organizers and activists have raised concern about the racially discriminatory policing in Memphis for years. In 2016, for example, civil rights leaders said a broken taillight justifies a stop in one community and not another. You can see there's profiling going on here. It always been here. It's just that we can now measure it. In 2020, community leaders were concerned about accountability and excessive force, including force and routine traffic stops. And in 2021, activists urged MPD to limit pretextual stops for non-movement violations and deprioritize marijuana possession offense. Even before the death of Tyree Nichols, Memphians described unnecessary aggressive encounters during traffic stops and questioned whether their stops promoted public safety. A woman told us that after growing up in Memphis, she was shocked to learn that in other cities, police officers did not repeatedly pull people over for low-level traffic stops. Moreover, MPD's data show that MPD traffic enforcement has not meaningfully reduced vehicle crashes in Memphis over the past 5 years. Damn. So y'all been saturating us and killing us and all of this shit in our neighborhoods, and it ain't helped not one bit. Y'all, it's actually gotten worse. Boy, y'all geniuses. Geniuses, I tell you, fucking geniuses. All right. Traffic enforcement can be a part of an effective public strategy, but city and law enforcement leaders must assess their practices and make changes where necessary. In Memphis, the police department has adopted practices that lead to significant racial disparities without examining whether these practices are necessary to achieve public safety and address violent crime. Oh, don't do that. All right, y'all. This is going to be a heavy trigger right here. This is the part I was talking about with the behavioral health. If you need to exit out, respectfully do so, because some of this is going to be tough to hear. So this does include kids as well. So protect your mental, because this shit was hard for me to hear. So, but we're almost done. Like we passed halfway, y'all. So we almost done. The city of Memphis and MPD violate the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, by discriminating against people with behavioral health disabilities when providing emergency Gas, you fuck me. That damn message that popped up. Shit. Yeah. We still got, hold on, what page? We got 20 more. It was 73 pages. And this is, I'm reading a lot of it, but a lot of it I'm not, because some of it is redundant and saying the same thing over and over again. But some of this stuff, like I said, I had no idea about, especially like with the behavioral health and how they respond to that. It's bad. So the city of Memphis and MPD violate the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, by discriminating against people with behavioral health disabilities when providing emergency response services. Each year, MPD officers respond to tens of thousands of 911 calls involving behavioral health Some of these calls are from the people with behavioral health disabilities calling because they are experiencing a crisis. Other calls are from family members or bystanders who call when they see someone who may need behavioral health support. The city's own 911 call takers code the majority of these calls as nonviolent. But the city requires MPD officers to respond to all of these calls, which leads to unnecessary police interactions. In a significant number of these incidents, MPD officers, including specially trained CIT, which is the Crisis Intervention Team, it's CIT, officers use unnecessary force or mock and belittle people with behavioral health disabilities. Title II of the ADA prohibits the city and MPD from subjecting people with disabilities to discrimination. The city and MPD cannot exclude people with disabilities from participation in or deny them in the benefits of city services, programs, or activities, including the city's emergency response system. The city must provide people with disabilities an equal opportunity to participate in and benefit from city services and ensure that it is as effective in affording equal opportunity to obtain the same result as provided to others. If necessary to avoid discrimination, the city and MPD must take reasonable modifications to policies, practices, or procedures unless they can show that making such modifications would fundamentally alter the nature of the service, program, or activity offered. To evaluate the city's and MPD's compliance with the ADA, we work with experts in the 911 dispatch, behavioral health services, and crisis response to analyze hundreds of 911 calls and police incidents involving behavioral health. Reviewed how MPD officers responded to behavioral health emergencies, as well as how call takers and dispatchers handle those calls. We reviewed audio recordings of 911 calls, body-sworn camera footage of officers' encounters, policies, and data. We also accompanied CIT officers and other city responders on ride-alongs, and we spoke to 911 call takers, dispatchers, MPD officers, behavioral health providers, and people with behavioral health disabilities who have interacted with police. For most health emergencies, a person who calls 911 receives a response from health professionals. But for emergencies involving even behavioral health, a person who calls 911 receives a police response. Even though a person who calls 911 for a behavioral health emergency could, in many cases, receive a response from the behavioral health professionals, such as the mobile crisis team. As a result, people with behavioral health disabilities do not have an equal opportunity to benefit from the city's emergency response system as people without behavioral health disabilities. The city and MPD rely on the CIT program to respond to behavioral health emergencies. They established the CIT program in 1988. They were the first in the country. How in the fuck they started this damn barbecue and they can't finish the motherfuckers beyond me. I don't know how we start this shit, and it was a model all across the country. And now look, y'all suck at it. What the fuck? The goal of the CIT program is to offer a more humane and calm approach bullshit to people experiencing behavioral and health issues. But we found that CIT officers regularly escalate encounters with people with behavioral health needs. As many calls involving behavioral health in Memphis could be resolved without law enforcement. Some in Memphis have recognized the need for an alternative response. One fire department official told us, "I wish there was a third option for response." Similarly, a high-ranking MPD official said, "We would love for another agency to handle these calls." And one mother told us the city reliance on police causes her to worry for her adult son with mental illness because officers often treat a person with behavioral disabilities like a criminal rather than connect with them and help. The city operates a joint response program which deploys behavioral health professionals along with police, but its limited capacity and reliance on police prevent it from meeting the city's need for a non-law enforcement response to behavioral health emergencies. The city could make reasonable modification to its emergency response system, including to its joint response program, to ensure that it provides non-discriminatory response to behavioral health professionals to behavioral health emergencies when appropriate. Oh no, they do go through the class, Pika. They have to go through the class, but even when they're in the class, they said they didn't learn shit. That's the problem. In Memphis, police officers respond to all behavioral health calls. MPD Emergency Communication Center is the gateway to the city's emergency response system and coordinate the city response to calls from 911 and MPD's non-emergency line. Call takers transfer to the Memphis Fire Department in event of a fire or medical emergency. They classify other calls based on the caller's description of the event. They label approximately 20,000 calls per year as mental consumer calls, such as calls from people seeking support during a behavioral health crisis. Call takers further classify these calls based on whether the subject of all demonstrates a potential for violence. Call takers mark an additional average of nearly 2,600 calls per year as involving a person experiencing a behavioral health emergency using a weapon. Between 2018 and 2023, call takers classified about 75% of behavioral health calls as nonviolent and unarmed. Many behavioral health calls in Memphis do not require police to respond. We worked with experts in behavioral health and crisis to respond and analyze a sample of mental consumer calls. Many of these calls involved a person with suicidal thoughts but no immediate plan, or someone experiencing delusional thinking, or responded to hallucinations. For many, documentation and call audio revealed no safety concerns needing police response. For example, one man called 911 saying he was suicidal, but there was no indication he had weapons or imminently dangerous. Behavioral health professionals could have responded, assessed his need, and connected him with mental health services as appropriate. Instead, MPD dispatched officers who handcuffed the man, patted him down, searched his pockets before bringing him to the hospital. A woman with PTSD and bipolar disorder called 911 and specifically requested the mobile crisis service. The call taker confirmed she just had ran out of her meds, but told the woman, "We'll get the police out." A behavioral health response, if available, could have safely handled that call. Instead, 5 MPD officers took her into custody, handcuffed her, and brought her to a behavioral health facility. One woman encountered MPD officers at least 169 times over a 5-year period. She called 911 repeatedly, sometimes because she had suicidal thoughts or was experiencing non-threatening delusions. Over 94% of those police encounters ended with police committing her to a hospital care without criminal charges. Behavioral health professionals could have responded to most of those behavioral health emergencies, connecting her with community services and reducing MPD uses resources. The number of behavioral health calls that do not require police response is likely greater than those classified by MPD as nonviolent and mental consumers. We found behavioral health issues present in calls coded as check welfare, suicide, and man down. For some of these calls, officers were dispatched when a non-police response may have been appropriate. such as when a bystander called 911 because a person had been living outside of a mental health clinic for 3 days and was non-responsive. MPD call takers sometimes fail to ask callers about the existence or absence of safety risks. Gathering the right information is critical to ensure safety and determining the appropriate type of responder. Failing to evaluate safety risks can lead call takers to assume danger is present and promote heavy police response. The city offers limited ways to behavioral health professionals to respond to 911 calls. Since 2017, the city has operated the Crisis Assessment and Response to Emergencies, which is a CARE team, as CARE, which may respond to certain behavioral health calls. Each team includes a SIT officer sent at the same time as a behavioral health professional and a paramedic who arrive in a separate vehicle. The CARE team operates throughout the fire department, so only the MPD force the fire only calls that MPD forwards to the fire department are eligible are low priority calls that involve behavioral health issues, but only one team operates at a time. And fire department dispatchers told us CARE is unavailable when it's needed. Memphis recently scaled back the program to run 12 hours a day. One police official admitted the capacity is not equal to the call volume. In many calls we reviewed, the CARE team would have been appropriate response, but dispatchers sent only police. Separately, a single provider dispatches mobile crisis service to respond across Shelby County. At present, the service cannot be dispatched from 911 or the crisis hotline. Moreover, mobile crisis in Shelby County will not respond to any behavioral health calls without police. When the CARE team responds to a call, MPD sends at least 2 more officers, regardless of the circumstances or safety risks. In one incident we reviewed, at least 4 additional officers responded with a CARE team to a man experiencing suicidal ideation who called 911 for help. The man was calm but became upset when all 5 officers surrounded him and ordered him in the back of a police car to transport him to a behavioral health facility. When he tried to walk away, 3 officers pushed him against the side of the car, handcuffed him, while the other 2 officers closed in around him. One officer told him he was acting crazy. The behavioral health professional with the CARE team spoke with the man only briefly throughout this encounter, often stood away from the scene and remained behind the 5 officer, and the paramedic walked him to the police car. One dispatcher recalled an incident when she sent 3 officers to a call from a parent seeking help with their nonviolent child with ADHD. Because they're a mental health consumer, by policy, we have to send 3 officers, the dispatcher said. I think it's scary for a kid sending more officers than just because a person has a behavioral health disability is unwarranted and discriminatory. Sending MPD officers to respond to people with behavioral health disabilities is often harmful, ineffective, and unnecessary. MPD policy dictates that officers should consider using de-escalation techniques when responding to people experiencing behavioral health issues. But our review demonstrated that the city's police-focused behavioral response has resulted in officers using force against people with behavioral health disabilities that is both unreasonable and discriminatory. In our random sample of less lethal force incidents, nearly 1/3 of the incidents involved people who appeared to be experiencing behavioral health crisis, and officers used unreasonable force in a significant portion of those incidents. In the other incidents, officers mocked or demeaned people with disabilities or acted on harmful stereotypes. In many of these incidents, officers knew the person had a disability. Officers could have safely made reasonable modifications to resolve the encounter peacefully. When officers belittle, verbally abuse, or otherwise mistreat people with behavioral health symptoms based on stereotypes or misconceptions about mental illness, they unlawfully discriminate against people on the basis of disability. The discriminatory and harmful response denies people with behavioral health disabilities an equal opportunity to benefit from the city's emergency response team. Memphis primarily relies on MPD Crisis Intervention Team (CIT) program to respond to incidents involving behavioral health issues. MPD is widely recognized as the founder of the CIT programs, and police departments across the nation have adopted the Memphis model. Blah, blah, blah. CIT officers should also assume responsibility for the scene. Oh, no. This one needs to be read. In 1988, after officers shot and killed a man with a history of mental illness and substance abuse who was cutting himself with a knife, under the Memphis model, police departments are expected to collaborate with local behavioral health professionals and divert people with mental illness from the criminal justice system to mental health treatment. CIT officers receive specialized training in crisis intervention and should be available throughout the city during all shifts for dispatch to mental health crisis. CIT officers should also assume responsibility for the scene, de-escalate crisis, and assess whether to transport people for further mental health evaluation. Of MPD's nearly 1,800 officers, around 250 are CIT officers. MPD officers and staff at the Emergency Communications Center reported that CIT officers are often not available. Contrary to the goals of the Memphis model, CIT officers often escalate encounters and use combative tactics almost immediately after arriving on the scene to behavioral health calls. For example, in multiple encounters, officers taunted, threatened, and used force against an 8-year-old black boy with a history of mental health treatment. One time, the boy's mother called 911 when he locked his family out their house. She reported that the boy had a behavioral health diagnosis and had threatened to harm himself in the past. When the officers arrived, the boy stood with his hands on his hip, looked up at the CIT officer who was there, and stuck out his tongue. Why he do that? Because the officer response was combative and threatening. You this close to me taking my belt off. This close, he said, while holding his finger about an inch apart. The CIT officer eventually grabbed the child by his arm, prepared to handcuff him and take him to the hospital. When the boy softly asked if he could put his shoes on, the CIT officer bent the boy's arm and screamed in his face, "Bro, do you not see this power? The hurt, don't it? Don't it? I can break your arm with a snap of my wrist." The boy stood by as the CIT officer yelled in his face. Later on, when the boy protested going to the hospital, officers lifted him horizontally by his arms and legs and brought him down, face down on the floor to handcuff him. 8 years old. Finally, officers placed the boy in the back of a police car, and the CIT officer threatened him again because he kicked the door. "You see this taser on my hip? That's 50,000 volts that I'm going to put in your little body. Is that what you want?" 3 months later, a different CIT officer threw, grabbed, pushed, handcuffed the same boy, before bringing him to a psychiatric hospital. Again, the SIT officer ignored the child's behavioral health issues and used unnecessary force. This time, the boy's mother called 911 because her son was acting out and showing signs of extreme anger. When the officers arrived, she told them her son at least had 4 behavioral health diagnoses and he had started taking a new medication that day. Ma'am, you need your ass beat too. I'm sorry, Mama, I gotta call you out. Mama, if they did your boy like that the first 3 times, why the fuck you keep calling them? You're trying to get your son. I'ma say it. Fuck that. I'ma say it. If these folks have been in your house 3 damn times and you see how they fucking done your boy, why the fuck you keep calling them, ma'am? I gotta fault you for this shit too. I'm sorry. I just, no, hell no. Y'all throw my son, pick my son up, shit like that. Hell no. You do that shit in front of me. You think I'm gonna call you a second, third, or fourth time? Fuck out of here. Especially when I know my child got 4 different diagnoses and he just changed his meds that day, so he off his rocker. I need to take his ass back to Lakeside. That's what I need to do as a parent. Fuck, I'm gonna keep calling the police for. You gonna fuck around and have your child 6 feet in the ground, ma'am. They don't give a fuck about your kid. I'm sorry. I had to tell Mama about herself. I hope she ain't calling them no more. Ma'am, look, I'm not trying to shame you or nothing like that. But if they've done your child like this 3 to 4 times already, don't keep calling them. They're not going to help you. Though the child was calm when the officers arrived, the officer twice lifted him in the air, threw him onto the couch, and then yelled in the boy's face, "You're 2 seconds away from meeting the real motherfucking officer's name, all right? You don't want me to turn up on your little ass." Based on the MPD records, this 8-year-old boy had at least 9 encounters with officers between December 2021 through August of 2023. 9 encounters. And I'm not trying to shame Mama. I'm not. But what the fuck, ma'am? Reach out to the men in your community. You got leaders, ma'am. You got men. Go to a church. There's men in your community that will help you. Stop calling the police, though. You gonna get your son hurt. Because one, he's a child, and whatever diagnosis he has, I'm not trying to armchair diagnose him, but evidently he does have behavioral issues. Why would you put your child in that type of situation? Why would you put your child in that environment? These cops don't give a fuck if you 5-year-old, if you holding a damn gun, your ass gonna get shot. And I hope you learn, ma'am, stop calling them. There's people in your community, men in your community that will help. If you feel like he needs 24/7 care, then there's options for that. But stop calling the police, because you're going to call them and that one time he doesn't listen to police and there's nothing nobody can do. We cannot bring people back from the dead. I'm sorry. What was that? That one just. That's why I told y'all heavy trigger warning on this. Like that part irritates the fuck out of me though. That one hurt my soul. It did, because I'm like, as a mother, what point do you say enough is enough? You ain't finna keep doing my baby like that. Fuck it. Like, I wouldn't let them do my dogs like that. If one of them motherfuckers tased my dog, I'm going to jail, because I'm telling you, you hurt my dog, I hurt you, and you better hope I don't hurt you worse. And if I'm that way about a fucking dog, man, look here, I smiling on my mugshot every year when I do my prison ID, doing life. Like, this shit crazy as hell. Ain't no way I'm gonna keep calling. I'm sorry, Mama. I don't know what your situation is, and I'm sorry for going off like that. But at the end of the day, ma'am, no, ma'am. Police is not the answer for your son. He is not scared of them. Evidently, he's not fazed by them. So stop calling them, because I know what you're trying to do, and it's not working. You can't put a fear in a child that don't fear shit. You can't. We observed SIT officers in Memphis belittle and mock people with behavioral health disabilities. In one incident, a SIT officer hit a man in the head, threatened him with a taser, while other officers called him a motherfucker, bitch, and a dumbass. The officers arrested him for misdemeanor warrant. A SIT officer in a different incident responded to a call about a man he knew who had behavioral health issues and immediately yelled at him, "You're under arrest, motherfucker. Get your motherfucking ass over here. Hands on the car, dickhead," while other SIT officers watched. This officer later pepper sprayed the man 4 times while he was handcuffed and in the backseat of a patrol car. So he was handcuffed and in the backseat of a patrol car. And you fucking, okay. All right. Got it. The officer shut the door and the window so the irritant could not dissipate and called the man a worthless piece of incestuous shit who can live in a robot society and have a lobotomy. You heard that right, folks. You heard that. Who can live in a robot society and have a lobotomy. And he was an incestuous piece of shit. SIT officers should generally assume primary responsibility for a behavioral health related scene and advise other officers on strategies to de-escalate crisis and resolve encounters appropriately. Instead, we saw SIT officers abdicate this responsibility and defer to other officers. At times, SIT officers watched while other officers screamed and cursed at people with disabilities. One SIT officer called a man a motherfucker after watching a fellow officer punch the man in the face, trigger warning, 18 times. Another SIT officer responded to a woman who called 911 repeatedly and was believed to be experiencing behavioral health symptoms. When he arrived, no, he punched a man 18 times in the face while he was handcuffed. And the SIT officer watched, didn't say a fucking thing. When he arrived, the SIT officer did not engage with the woman and instead stood by as another officer called this woman a crazy bitch and told her, "You've been fucking calling all night long. This bullshit. We got other shit to deal with." The same officer then transported her to a behavioral mental health facility for evaluation. Now, this is where our good old friend make his debut. Until recently, MPD permitted only SIT officers to carry tasers, a less lethal weapon that can cause immense pain and incapacitation. MPD's use of tasers is a part of a pattern or practice of unreasonable force, we found. We also found that SIT officers repeatedly fire tasers at people with behavioral disabilities without justification. One SIT officer was known to his supervisor as Taserface. Colin, you thought I forgot about you. I ain't forget about you, Colin Berry Hill. You thought I forgot about you, you piece of shit. You thought I forgot about you quitting in 2020 because you ran your ass up out of Shelby County because you got caught doing what the fuck you was doing, which was tasing folks while they was already fucking handcuffed. Colin, you must thought I forgot about that. I didn't. I don't never forget a piece of shit named Taserface. Never. Yeah, you quit during the investigation. You took your sneaky looking ass down there to South Haven, Mississippi. They hired you and took you. And then your punk ass got, guess what? Guess what happened, y'all? He got terminated down there too in June of 2020. You want to know why? Because he pulled somebody out of their motherfucking house with no justification or probable cause. Then held the motherfucker in the squad car and wouldn't tell him what he did wrong. The review board said Barry Hill is no good. He is no good, so they had to let his ass go. When they asked the South Haven police chief, why the fuck would you hire somebody named Taserface? Well, we didn't see nothing wrong with it. I mean, he fits right on in. Oh, shit. Like, we be tasing folks down here too. What damn difference does it make? That's pretty much what he said. He didn't say that, but that's pretty much what he said. Because it was brought to his attention that, hey, Colin out here violating folks' rights up in here in Memphis. Why the fuck would you hire him? He's a liability. And sure shit, good old in June of 2024, guess what? That liability showed. Because then his ass was in violation because he charged his ass in somebody's house, yanked that person out of their house, wouldn't tell them what they did, and he thought he was just doing a good deed. I ain't forget about you, Colin. DOJ didn't want to say your name, but bitch, that was public record. I had already dropped a story on you, and I'm going to keep saying your damn name, Colin. In one incident, he fired a taser at a suicide, and we're talking about Taserface, Colin. Him. In one incident, he fired a taser at a suicidal man who posed no threat and was already surrounded by at least 4 officers who had control of his hands. MPD found that the taser use was unnecessary and needless and identified 2 other incidents during the same SIT officer discharged his taser without justification. The SIT officer resigned before he could be disciplined. Then you ran your little sneaky ass down there to Mississippi and South Haven, and they hired your ass, and then turned around, you got fired down there. Yeah. Yep. Colin, I ain't forget about you, boy. I might just redo your video and see where you at now. Might just let them know, because your ass probably ain't out of policing yet. I might just contact your job. Oh, we know everything. His shit was public records. The news did a whole story on his ass. Another SID officer with a pattern of improper taser used serious force when responding to a nonviolent mental consumer call. Within 10 seconds of encountering the man and without warning, the officer grabbed the man's neck, pulled him to the ground, and fired his taser at close range. The man was face down on the ground with 3 officers already on top of him. The SID officer then threatened, "I will tase you again and I will not let up on the button this time." Supervisors found no policy violations. Another SID officer fired his taser at a woman 4 times while she was lying face down on the ground, handcuffed with her legs tied. So she's legs is tied, handcuffed, face down on the ground, and she got hit 4 times with the taser. Yep. Okay. Officers knew the woman was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was in crisis. Before firing his taser, the officer yelled at her, "You're not going to the psychiatric hospital. I'm going to put you in prison because that's where you fucking belong because you're not smart enough to listen." In another incident, the same SID officer fired his taser 3 times at a suicidal man while this man was kneeling against the bed with both hands up. Before firing his taser, he shouted orders without giving the man time to comply and called him fucking stupid. Supervisors found no policy violations in either incident. As one mother of a girl with a behavioral health disability put it, some SID officers do more antagonizing than assisting, but SID officers remain confident in their effectiveness. In one incident, multiple SID officers responded to a call about a mental disturbance at a hospital and grabbed a man in crisis on the arm before even speaking to him. The man was standing outside the hospital with staff. When he tried to step away, officer grabbed his pants and roughly dragged him to the back of the wall. They pushed him against the wall, shouting, "I'm going to tase you, I'm going to tase you." The officers eventually pushed him onto his stomach and handcuffed him while ordering, "Give me your fucking hands before I pepper spray you." The officer's behavior prompted hospital staff to ask them to leave, but the officers refused. All of us are SID officers, deal with mental health. We know how to deal with it. I swear that's what this damn report says. That's exactly what the fuck it said. All of us are SID officers, deal with mental health. We know how to deal with it. A lack of officer supervision and oversight and poor training contributes to the violations we saw. MPD SID coordinator leads the SID program, organizes the SID training, and educates the community about the program. The coordinator's authority is limited, and there is no centralized oversight of SID officers, other than each officer's precinct supervision. Precinct supervisors are not always SID trained and may have biases of their own. Multiple MPD colonels who supervise patrol officers told us that mental health issues are associated with violence and they need to use force. The SID coordinator cannot remove officers from the program and does not mirror or review the conduct of SID officers. Indeed, according to the SID coordinator, MPD has only removed 1 officer from the program due to excessive force, though some SID officers report using force frequently. One SID officer reported using force in 19 incidents from 2018 to 2023, more than nearly any other police officer during this period. We saw no evidence that the supervisors evaluated why this SID officer used force so often. MPD approved every use of force as consistent with policy. MPD's training on behavioral health prompts officers to approach people with behavioral health disabilities with force and aggression, and our review revealed they do often. For instance, a training given to a new officer erroneously teaches that people with bipolar disorder do not feel pain. The training instructs officers that officers' primary concern when encountering people with health disabilities is the safety, because a person with mental illness doesn't know what they're doing half the time. So you kill them? So because MPD also teaches officers that people experience a behavioral health crisis may not be capable of de-escalated. The city and MPD can make reasonable modifications to its behavioral health response to avoid discrimination. The ADA requires the city of Memphis and MPD to make reasonable modifications in policies, practices, and procedures when the modifications are necessary to avoid discrimination on the basis of disability, unless they can demonstrate that making the modification would fundamentally alter the nature of the service, program, or activity. Whether a particular modification is reasonable and not a fundamental altercation for any state or local government includes a fact-based assessment of that particular jurisdiction. Here, our investigation revealed that the city does not need to fundamentally alter its emergency response system to comply with the ADA. Instead, the city of Memphis can make the following reasonable modifications to avoid unequal treatment of people with behavioral health disabilities. Ensure appropriate response to behavioral health incidents. I'm thinking about the damn insurance dude, the CEO. My bad, y'all. First, the city of Memphis and MPD can modify their policies, procedures, and training program with respect to emergency dispatching to ensure that police are only dispatched to behavioral health calls when their presence is necessary. This includes sending behavioral health responders to some calls as a part of a joint response or without law enforcement. As discussed above, the city currently operates one co-response team through the CARE program half-time. The city can expand the hours of operation and capacity of the program and begin dispatching the CARE team without MPD officers when a police response is not needed. They're not going to do that because they want all that money to themselves. MPD is not willing. If them motherfuckers wanted $15 million for overtime and got it, baby, they're not going to spread a dime for you. They're going to buy new fucking cars and equipment and bulletproof vests and shit. They're not. I'm just being honest. They're not. That's why people, I kid y'all not, when I was on the call, people were asking, like, how much is this? Bottom line, how much is this going to cost Memphis? It was kind of basically saying, like, shit, if it's going to cost us too much, fuck it. To aid call takers in choosing the correct response to individual behavioral health calls, the city can provide training for MPD call takers and develop better dispatching protocols to identify behavioral health issues and communicate those issues to responders. These efforts can be assisted by behavioral health professionals embedded within dispatch to de-escalate situations on the phone and evaluate when it would be safe and effective to send a civilian-led response. Hold on now. I'm torn on this. We'll talk about that later. Or whether a response is needed at all. The city can also revise its training and policy for call takers and dispatchers to ensure they do not reflect incorrect stereotypes about people with behavioral health disabilities. MPD unnecessarily escalates counters with children. Mom, I'm almost done. Give me a minute. We have serious concerns about MPD's treatment of children and the lasting impact police encounters on their well-being and their resilience during interactions. I don't even know why you tried to play with me like that. During interactions with children regarding minor issues, MPD officers escalate the encounters with aggressive and demeaning language and at times needless force. At times, MPD aggressively escalates encounters with children who have committed no crime or where the child is a victim. In one incident, officers handcuffed and used force against a 16-year-old black girl who called MPD to report she had been assaulted. Before arriving at the precinct to give a statement, officers handcuffed the girl after she refused to give them her phone. When she became agitated and reactive, the officers responded with insults and threats, telling her, when the handcuffs do come off, ooh, I'm itching. I leave my gloves on when I fight, and if I gotta whip your ass, I will. After 3 hours, officers removed the handcuffs to reposition them as she complained that her hands were hurt and swollen and tried to move her wrists. The officer grabbed her and pushed her face down onto the ground to handcuff her again. The girl was then arrested and charged with disorderly conduct. MPD has escalated interactions, and that one is online, just FYI. I've seen the video of that one. She recorded it, and that was another reason why they got pissed off, because she was recording them trying to confiscate her phone, and she was like, no. And it escalated from, it was bad. MPD has escalated interactions when enforcing laws that are intended to keep children safe. After two black boys aged 15 and 16 ran from an officer who was citing them for curfew violations, officers demeaned the boys and threatened violence. When one boy asked if they were going to jail, the officer responded, If it's my decision, hell yeah. I'd have so much damn fun rolling your ass down to jail. I love doing that shit. Another officer threatened to assault the boys when he worried that he may have lost his MPD mobile device during the foot pursuit. I'm fucking these little kids up, man. I'm fucking you all up. I just wanted to let y'all know that. MPD officers have mistreated children in crisis, even when it's clear the child has significant disabilities. Heavy trigger warning. In one incident, a city officer threatened to take a 14-year-old black boy to adult jail because the boy ran away from home. The boy was diagnosed with autism, ADHD, bipolar disorder, and developmental delays, and had the intellectual functioning of a 4-year-old boy. The boy's mother had called the police after the boy, who had been released from a mental health facility that day, got upset at bedtime, threw a garbage can and a chair, and ran from home. After the boy was found, a CIT officer raised his taser towards the boy, who was calm and compliant, and told him, I don't want to use it on you, but if you don't listen to me, I can. Officers planned to take the boy to the hospital for psychiatric treatment, but the CIT officer continued to threaten him, saying that he would take the child to jail with the big boys, and if I have to come back over here because you want to be disrespectful to your mother, you and I can go somewhere else, one-on-one, you and me. We'll see how strong you really are. Let that sink in. You're talking to him like he's 14, but mentally he's 4. In some encounters, officers fail to account for a child's age, size, and lack of maturity. For example, officers dispersed a crowd after a fight at a high school football game. One officer walked through the crowd repeatedly threatening, "I'm finna spray the fuck out of these folks." She followed a relatively small statured teen girl trying to leave the premises, yelling, "Bye, bye," at her, and the officer taunts and provoked the girl, who talked back. In response, the officer shoved the girl, yelling, "Get out this motherfucking lot." The girl pushed back, and the 2 other officers responded, approached the girl from behind, threw her on the ground. The officers then lifted the girl in the air, slammed her face down into the pavement. The officer who started the altercation told her to get her dumb ass up and called her a stupid bitch as the girl was led away in handcuffs. We also have serious concerns about that MPD interrogations of children may lead to involuntary and false confessions in violation of the 14th Amendment. Attorneys working in the juvenile justice system told us they were troubled by MPD's interrogation practices, including lying to children, making false promises, and making threats. During one interrogation, for example, a detective told a handcuffed 17-year-old teen who had not completed 9th grade that he might be transferred to adult system. The detective said that he hoped the boy was willing to share as much as information we need in the case, and that the child had an opportunity to help himself out in this. According to attorneys representing children, MPD questions children without parents or attorneys, even when parents and attorney request access. And prosecutors described MPD's manipulation of children during interrogations and explained that MPD will get confessions, but they should be trying to get genuine information, according to a prosecutor. The child will keep changing their story until MPD gets the confession. This is what the prosecutor, the child will keep changing their story until MPD gets their confession. Many local leaders expressed concerns to us about the lack of resources for children in Memphis, including in-home services, family support services, intervention services, mental health services, violence prevention services, and rehabilitation services. Here's the thing. We have them. We just don't have enough of it. And it seems to be only in West 10. We have it's just we don't have enough of it, and because of budget constraints and all of that, they want to pretend like they don't physically have the money for it. They do. They just don't want to put it into shit like that. They rather build a new prison. They rather do this. They rather do that. Well, shit, we wouldn't have to build a new prison if we had services to help keep their asses out of prison, but I digress. The lack of access to needed services and support that promotes child development can result in unnecessary and damaging interactions between children and MPD. An MPD commander raised concerns that Memphis is on the verge of losing a generation of black kids to the cemetery or jail, and recognized it as not a problem that MPD can solve. Though provide needed services and resources for children in Memphis fails beyond MPD control. MPD must ensure that when it is called to respond to children, officers work to de-escalate rather than escalate these encounters. Unlawful policing in Memphis is caused in part by MPD's deficient policies, supervision, training, and accountability systems. MPD policies lack clear guidance on constitutional standards. MPD does not provide effective training to recruits or current officers on constitutional policing practices. First line supervisors and commanders have overlooked or tried to justify legal violations, and MPD does not act on misconduct complaints, complete thorough investigations, or adequately discipline officers who have engaged in misconduct. We closely examined how MPD trains and supervises officers and holds them accountable for misconduct. We visited MPD's training academy and interviewed officers, field training officers, and supervisors. We interviewed supervisors in every patrol precinct, as well as supervisors in specialized units. We met with investigators and commanders in MPD's Inspectional Service Bureau, ISB, which investigates alleged misconduct. Y'all don't do shit. Y'all sit on y'all ass. We reviewed MPD's data about complaint investigations and a random sample of complaint investigations into a range of alleged misconduct. MPD does not give officers clear guidance on what they can and cannot do. MPD's force policies do not accurately reflect constitutional standards, such as the requirement that force be reasonable and proportional to the threat faced. Similarly, MPD's policies on street enforcement do not provide officers with appropriate standards on when they may detain or search people. The lack of clear guidance exacerbated by pressure from supervisors to make traffic stops, nor does MPD have an effective process to develop new policies or update current policies to ensure compliance with the law. We saw little evidence that MPD policy development process regularly incorporates feedback from supervisors and training staff about the gaps in officer knowledge and conduct in the field. Officers and supervisors told us they had minimal input. But here's the thing, and this is what I've always had a problem with. Why is it cops can sit here and claim ignorance of the law, but when we do it, we still get locked the fuck up? They're supposed to enforce it, right? And they decide, how the fuck you don't know basics? Like search and seizure. You don't even, what the fuck? MPD supervisors failed to ensure that officers followed departmental policies. In many incidents described above, MPD supervisors ignored or excused obvious legal violations, from excessive force to the mistreatment of people with behavioral health disabilities. Supervisors overlooked plainly excessive force and rarely explained their determination in the officer's use of force complied with policy. Despite MPD's focus on traffic enforcement, we saw little evidence that supervisors meaningfully fully review traffic stops to ensure they are lawful. Supervisors encourage officers to make large number of traffic stops and reward those who do so with advancement in the police department. Neither first-line supervisors nor high-ranking officials have addressed unlawful conduct or taken proactive steps to prevent repeated violations. Under MPD's current rank structure, lieutenant serve as first-line supervisor for patrol officers, but they enter the rank after serving as detectives who spend their days investigating crime rather than responding to 911 calls or making traffic stops as patrol officers do. MPD's supervisory practices also differ across patrol precincts. In some precincts, for example, supervisors told us that precinct commander, typically a colonel, reviews each use of force. In other precincts, the review process stops at the mid-level or first-line supervisor like a major or lieutenant. We also did not see any evidence of close supervision in specialized units. Well, we already knew that. We knew with the Scorpion unit. I mean, y'all ain't telling me something I didn't know. Really, having this report, y'all didn't tell me something I didn't know. Now, the behavioral health and the kids really explained a lot for me. It did. But majority of this report, y'all are not telling me shit I didn't know. Yeah. No close supervision of specialized unit, despite the central role these units play in MPD's enforcement strategy. Last year, MPD tried to create a new rank of second lieutenant to provide more direct supervision for officers. I covered that. I covered that. They randomly just made up a rank. And Nashville said, that ain't even post policies. Y'all can't do that. Y'all, hell no. Take that rank back right now because y'all cannot do that. And Memphis tried and they lost. And yeah, they did that. They made up a whole rank and tried to strong arm Nashville. And Nashville said, you got us fucked up. Take that shit up out of there right now. Y'all are violating post policies. How the fuck y'all, you just gonna make a rank? They did. MPD's police union blocked the new rank in arbitration, and the city appeal is pending. Regardless of whether MPD creates a new rank, it must ensure adequate first line supervision, especially regarding important matters like reviewing use of force, stop, searches, and arrests. Training deficiencies also contribute to MPD's systematic legal violations. MPD forces training primes officers to use force immediately rather than de escalate counters. MPD's training on stops does not provide clear guidance to officers on the necessary criteria to establish reasonable articulable suspicion for stops and frisk. In addition, MPD's training is often lecture-based rather than requiring active participation by officers. Told you, shitty-ass training. Officers told us they rarely receive regular refresher training on the use of force or other topics beyond legal updates. When new police graduate from the training academy, they are assigned to field training offices for several months for the on-job training. MPD does not regularly assess field training officers' performance. What the fuck? Wait a minute. Huh? That's crazy. I have truck drivers that have to go through a probationary period, and they're watched like a hawk. So if I have truck drivers that go through probation periods and they're watched like a hawk between me, the direct supervisor, huh? And this is in trucking. Not saying trucking ain't important because it very much so is. It's the reason why you get half of your shit you get now. But, huh? Okay. The quality of instruction varies, as one lieutenant admitted, not consistent in quality, not at all. Field training officers have limited influence over whether recruits pass their field training period. Officers told us that in the past, field training officers could fail new recruits when they were not up to the job. But now, lieutenants simply switch the recruit to a more lenient field training officer who allowed them just to become a part of the police force. And that's when they started, after the Great Resign, that's when they started laxing their requirements and started hiring any and everybody because they did the whole pay structure change and they made a lot of good officers quit. When they did the benefit restructuring in Memphis for government employees, a lot of people resigned. It wasn't just MPD either. MPD fails to hold officers accountable for misconduct. MPD does not consistently accept misconduct allegations, complete thorough investigation, or discipline officers when warranted. Most complaints do not receive a full investigation with witness interviews and other investigative steps. From 2018 to 2022, MPD reported that the Inspectional Services Bureau, ISB, opened full investigations into just 20.6% of complaints received. The remaining complaints were delegated to officer supervisor or otherwise resolved informally. MPD gives supervisors a great deal of power and discretion to resolve complaints, but supervisors also fail to conduct adequate investigations. Instead, they overlook or try to justify the violations. If someone files a formal complaint with ISB, that unit often closes the case after a normal preliminary inquiry. For the few sustained allegations, MPD does not impose appropriate discipline. As a result, MPD officers engage in repeated misconduct, harming community members and costing taxpayers millions of dollars. MPD supervisors fail to identify and investigate misconduct. MPD supervisors do not consistently accept or document all misconduct complaints, and some supervisors have talked people out of filing complaints. MPD requires patrol lieutenants to document complaints against civilian and police personnel, ensure that investigations are handled appropriately, and make sure the complaint is aware of who will follow up on the complaint. But in practice, supervisors do not consistently act on misconduct complaints. In one incident, a woman repeatedly told a lieutenant that an officer grabbed her while responding to a call for service at her house about a missing child. Are you fucking kidding me? So you trying to touch up on this woman while she has a fucking missing boy? In response, the lieutenant spent nearly 20 minutes going back and forth with the woman about the officer's conduct and told the woman that she wanted to explain our side. Though the woman asked if she could file a complaint against the officer, the lieutenant never gave her a clear answer. Instead, the lieutenant concluded the call and closed the complaint file, stated incorrectly that the woman did not want to file a complaint against the officers. Supervisors do not adequately investigate misconduct complaints they receive. They close many complaints within a day or two of receiving the complaint after reviewing minimal evidence. MPD supervisors, and this is why I stayed on Tyrese's case, and this is why his case was detrimental to what's going on in Memphis. Because as you see, everybody was in on the cover-up. That Skycam wasn't, though. That Skycam said, "Nah, I can't be a part of that." They had no choice. You see what they're doing? They don't even fucking investigate this shit. They'll let you open the complaint and then they'll close it in a day or two. Fuck your complaint. How about that? That's exactly what they're saying. This shit is crazy. MPD supervisors failed to take basic investigative steps such as identifying and interviewing relevant witnesses and objectively evaluating documentary evidence. Rather than interviewing the involved officers, supervisors allow officers to submit memos describing the incident that led to the complaint. Supervisors do not consistently record interviews with complaints and fail to canvass neighborhoods for witnesses. In one incident, a supervisor overlooked video evidence and mischaracterized what had occurred. A black woman was rear-ended by a white driver. An officer cursed at her and threatened to arrest her. When the woman tried to explain what happened, the officer was aggressive and rude. "That's not what I'm fucking asking you." He then grabbed the woman and threatened to arrest her for disorderly conduct, though the woman had did nothing wrong and had not even raised her voice. The woman tried to complain that the officer had no right to treat her that way, but an MPD supervisor mischaracterized the encounter and exonerated the officer, writing that the woman provoked officers to address her behavior. In her complaint, the woman wrote that the officer treated me as if I was nothing, but treated the white driver with the utmost respect. She felt violated and afraid of what the officer would do next, she wrote. "I felt as if I was not a citizen of the USA." MPD Internal Affairs does not conduct thorough and objective investigation. MPD does not adequately discipline officers for misconduct. One MPD officer was the subject of 9 different complaints in 2 years. One MPD officer was the subject of 9 different complaints in 2 years, including allegations of excessive force and improper conduct during traffic stops. In June of 2023, he repeatedly struck a man with a baton while the man was handcuffed in the backseat of a police car. In an earlier incident, he had punched a woman, grabbed her by the neck, and cursed at her in front of her children. He had also unlawfully frisked and handcuffed a man with autism during a traffic stop after cursing at him. MPD supervisors knew about the officer's conduct was problematic, but ignored or failed to address it. After one complained about a traffic stop in 2021, a supervisor wrote that MPD should monitor any other situations to circumvent any further complaints. MPD's data shows supervisors received 10 alerts about the officer's performance because of repeated complaints. But each time, a supervisor determined that the officer would not be placed in MPD's performance enhancement program, a non-disciplinary system to identify officers at risk for engaging in potential misconduct. Chief Davis has acknowledged problems with the MPD disciplinary systems, including untimeliness. That's where we have problems. Within the last year, ISB began attending disciplinary hearings along with members of MPD's legal department. And MPD has established a disciplinary matrix to ensure more consistency across cases. As a backstop, the chief and assistant chief can overturn disciplinary hearing officers' decisions, although they had not exercised this authority as of March of 2022. There are all steps in the right direction. Still, MPD will need to ensure that these changes are properly implemented and result in timely, consistent, appropriate discipline. MPD and the city should improve insight and transparency. Police accountability requires action on both sides, inside and outside the police department. But Memphis has not provided sufficient transparency or external oversight regarding public safety practices. In recent years, the city and MPD have taken steps to further transparency, including creating public dashboards and publishing reports on officers' activity. But the results have been mixed due to, in part, to limited data and lack of meaningful follow-up. For example, MPD's most recent complete public report, completed in July of 2023, summarizes data on complaints and use of force only through 2022, although MPD policy states that the report should include written recommendations regarding any police or training issue that needs to be addressed by the department. The 2022 report identified no significant discriminatory trends or patterns and no recommendations as to policy changes regarding use of force. So they're not governing themselves even with this whole thing in place. So they've been like, I gotta say, I fucking love the DOJ because they're like, look, y'all did this, but y'all still ain't doing it. The fuck? Because this board is just basically saying y'all good. External police oversight is not new in Memphis, but the city can do more to strengthen oversight practices. For nearly 30 years, the city's Civilian Law Enforcement Review Board investigated police misconduct complaints by community members and made recommendations to the police chief regarding those complaints. In May of 2023, Tennessee passed a law that limits the authority of civilian entities outside police departments, including the Civilian Law Enforcement Review Board. I covered that, to investigate alleged police misconduct. While the change reinforces the need for stronger internal accountability practices by MPD, there are other opportunities for productive external oversight. Rather than investigating individual complaints against officers, civilian entities can audit police practices and recommend changes to policies and training. In addition, the city and MPD can facilitate broader community engagement by providing timely and accurate data to the public about MPD's enforcement activity and public safety outcomes, including data about traffic stops, use of force, clearance rates, and misconduct complaints. During our investigation, we heard from many community members who were concerned about both violent crime and unlawful policing in Memphis, and who wanted to help establish lawful and effective public safety practices, improve transparency along with stronger internal accountability practice with help of the city and MPD address the unlawful practices described in this report. And we're going to go through these recommended remedial measures. I'm not going to read each one, or I'm not going to read the paragraphs that's behind it, but I will read out every one they have. So the city and MPD have engaged in a pattern of practice of conduct that violates federal law. To end this unlawful conduct, the city and MPD must address the deficiencies in policies, training, supervision, and accountability that contributed to legal violations described in this report. The recommended remedial measures below are a starting point for these necessary change. And this is the use of force section. 1. Improve use of force policies, reporting, and review procedures. 2. Develop and deliver new ongoing use of force and de-escalation training. 3. Enhance supervision and accountability regarding use of force. Stop, search, and arrest. Stop, search, and arrest policies and training. Adopt, implement, and train officers on policies that set forth the constitutional limits on stops, searches, frisks, seizures, and arrests, and ensure that officers comply within those limits. Require documentation on all stops, frisks, and searches. Collect data, include demographic, on all traffic and pedestrian stops, including stops that do not lead to citation and arrest. Provide clear directives to officers regarding enforcement activity. identifying and reducing racial disparities, collect, analyze, respond to enforcement data, develop and implement a comprehensive public safety plan, responded to people with behavioral health disabilities, send appropriate responses to behavioral health calls, modify behavioral health training for officers and MPD's SIT program, enhance combination with crisis hotline and other community service, responding to youth, develop and implement policies and training appropriate for youth, training, supervision, and accountability, improve academy, in-service, and field training, ensure close and effective supervision within MPD, direct and closely monitor specialized unit and task force. I can tell you them last three ain't gonna happen. Them last three ain't gonna happen. Yeah, they do. They use them damn dogs on them bad. When I read that shit about the dogs and them sicking the damn dogs on the teenagers, I'm like, what the fuck, man? But do I think real changes, and I'm not finna be on here much longer. I'm finna let y'all go. I gotta feed my babies, feed myself, all type of shit. Do I think real change is gonna come from the DOJ dropping this bombshell? Possibly some. Not a lot, though. I really don't expect them to change much with the behavioral health because let them tell it. They're building a brand new state of the art behavioral health center, whatever, out there in Binghamton. So I don't see them really doing much in that area. I don't see them doing much in the area of kids and how they handle kids. I don't. You can implement these policies all day long. But if they don't have the fucking supervisors, they got the balls to stand up and say, hey, bro. And I get it, retention is hard. That's another reason why they won't. That's another reason why they won't get rid of them, because retention, nobody wants to be a fucking cop. It's a lot of problems. It's a lot of problems with this. There's a lot of underlying shit that goes right along with this report. Just like, people are concerned with crime, which is a valid concern because it is high. I'm not gonna lie, that shit is high. But the thing is, like I've said before, you have to have better transportation services. You have to have better paying jobs, not this minimum wage crap. You have to put back into these communities. And as long as you're paying peanuts compared to what these streets can pay, you're not going to attract nobody. And I'm sorry, young folks are not attracted with 401k benefits and think, no, they want that right now money. If they can't spend 4 or 5 racks in a week and shit, you know what I'm saying? They're looking for that type of money. And the only way you're going to get that type of money is by going to a trade. And half of them have not even passed high school. I'm just being honest. Half of them haven't passed 9th grade. So they're not going to get that top money. So what you think they're going to do? And I'm not saying pay a machine operator $7,000 a month. I'm not saying that at all. But you have to make livable wages in order for people not to be enticed by the streets. That's first of all. Then you have to address the trauma that's in this city between addiction and the way y'all have let these drugs on these streets, and now what y'all are doing, which is another reason why crime is so damn high with all the constraints y'all have put on these drugs, which hasn't stopped, hasn't curbed. If anything, overdoses is actually higher now. Yeah, you need to address that. There's so many aspects I could touch on this 73-page report and see where the city of Memphis and MPD needs to fix a lot of shit, but they're not going to because of the money. That's, like I said, it was about 400 of us on that call. And the first thing they fucking asked was, how much is it going to cost us taxpayers? Which I understand that's a legitimate concern. But if you want the crime rate to go down, I'm willing to pay that, whether we have to pay it through state tax or, luxury tax or something like that, as long as you don't make that shit permanent. I'm willing to pay that, though, to help out so we can get crime down. That's how you have to spin shit. But you politicians, like, y'all not too bright, I don't think. I will. I have to link it though. Shit. I have to figure out how to do that part. And it may be in the morning. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. It's fucking 9 o'clock my time. I still gotta feed the dogs myself, so but I will post it so y'all can read it. Like, cause I did not read all of it. That was me skimming through it. If y'all read it, it wasn't linked, Pika. I sent it as an attachment. That's the thing. That's what I was saying. It wasn't a link, it was an attachment. Yeah, I'm gonna have to link it through PDF so I can send it. Um, but yeah, they released it quietly. We have a population of 630,000. Only 400 people attended the meeting. And I know some of them was out of towners because I sent it to them and I was like, "Can you join this?" And they did. They joined it. Like I said, they got the report. Dutch has the report because I wanted her to read it as well because I was like, this actually explains a lot if you look at it. And it's eye opening. It's eye opening when you take time and sit down and read something like that and you see really all the problems that exist in your community and you hate that it exists and you know what's going on because you see it on a daily yourself. It's kind of is fucked up and you feel helpless in that situation. So the least I could do is sit here and spend 2-3 hours sitting down reading that shit to everybody. It was really 3.5, but I don't regret it. I like we gotta want better for this city. And some of them things that they did mention, yes, it needs to be done. I just hope the city of Memphis figures out that yes, we need that. We're gonna have to bridge that divide, or you're gonna have another generation of black kids, like that person, community leader said. You're gonna have a generation of black. Bless you, son. You're gonna have a generation of black kids who hate the police, and that's not what you want, because they're gonna be 20 times worse than us. So. That's who I'm finna, man. I'm finna hit her up, see if she'll link it for me really quick. Nonsense. Can you link that for me and send it to me so I can post it? If you're still here. I'm pretty sure I could do it. I just don't. I'm not like, I don't know if y'all hear it in my voice, but yeah. And I'm hungry as hell. So, with that being said, y'all have a good night. I'll try to get it posted for y'all in the morning so y'all can read it though. Y'all be safe out here. Hit that like for me, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'll make sure y'all join us tomorrow night at Dutch's. I'll be posting it on my page tomorrow as well. So just make sure y'all tune in for that. I'll see y'all later. Peace, y'all.